Welcome back, Drifter. Today, I've got something truly special for you. You won't find anything this accurate or this detailed anywhere else on YouTube. All the divine items forged by the Smith God, the one who fell from Olympus, every weapon, every piece of armor, every building, and every relic forged by Hephaestus, and the powerful stories behind them. Just thinking about it sends chills down my spine. If you truly enjoy these stories, then take a few seconds to like and subscribe, because it is all the motivation I need to keep going. Alright, Drifters, settle in, let's begin. When the light of the blazing sun slipped beneath the horizon, the gods of Olympus each returned to their own homes. Homes not of mortal make, but crafted by the unmatchable hands of Hephaestus, whose skill and strength had shaped them with care and precision. Each dwelling stood alone in its perfection, fit for the divinity who lived within, built not just for comfort, but as a testament to the craftsmanship of the god of fire and forge. These houses were not only shelter, but sacred sanctuaries, structures that gleamed with otherworldly light and whispered of ancient power in every polished stone. In her own place, Hera entered her private chamber, a room fashioned for her by her own beloved son. The door leaves were shut tight into the posts, held in place by a secret bar only she could open, a security so finely wrought that no other god, however mighty, could disturb her peace. This chamber was her sanctuary, the one place in all the realms where even Zeus would pause and wait. And when desire stirred within him, she reminded him that this very place was ready, the bed prepared by Hephaestus himself, closed with such care that only they could cross its threshold. The chambers were more than functional. They were invitations, places of divine rest and shared secrets, woven into the fabric of Olympus by the smith's glowing hammer. Far away, beneath the peaks of heaven, Hephaestus kept his own house, a shining marvel made of imperishable bronze. Thetis, the silver-footed mother, came to him there once, stepping through a place that shimmered with starry gleam, a beacon among the abodes of the immortals. She found him working at his forge, sweat on his brow, twisting and turning as he manned his bellows, never resting, always creating. His home, like those he had made for others, was a wonder, not only enduring in its metal form, but alive with divine fire and intelligence, as though the walls themselves had memory. Elsewhere, when the gods gathered, they came together at the house of Zeus, which stood above all others, cloistered with smooth stone walks that invited both awe and peace. This too had been shaped by Hephaestus, a place of meeting and council, a structure where the firm floor met cloud and lightning, and the will of the sky took root in stone. In another place stood the palace of Aphrodite, a dwelling built with love and devotion when the god of the forge had taken her as his bride. Its courtyard opened wide to welcome visitors, and its walls carried the memory of love both tender and strained. Beneath its veranda, the room of the goddess waited in quiet splendor, touched by the same hands that shaped thrones and halls for kings of heaven. These palaces were not built in haste or fashioned merely for grandeur. They were the careful work of a god who gave form to the divine, turning metal into meaning. Beyond Olympus, the palace of the sun god rose high upon radiant columns, not just a home but a vision of light. Golden beams and flaming bronze shone from its heights, the roof and walls flashing with polished brilliance. Ivory gleamed along its faces, and silver doors reflected the passing of days. But what set it apart was not its materials, though they were rare and beautiful. It was the artistry that lived within every surface. Hephaestus had not only built, but had engraved, shaping the very universe into its panels. The great orb of the world, the seas that surrounded it, and the sky above were all etched into the metal like a living map. In the depths of the sea, the figures of water gods could be seen moving through the waves. Upon the land, mortals, animals, forests, and even the rivers and spirits of nature danced across the metal surface. And high above, the signs of the stars shone. 12 bright symbols of the heavens split evenly across the 2 great doors, each one glowing as if it held its own life. These engravings were not mere decorations. They were stories sealed in metal, time held still by the flame-born god, visions that made the palace a place of wonder far beyond anything the mortal eye could fully understand. This was how Hephaestus built, not only with strength and fire, but with imagination, memory, and meaning. Within the palaces stood thrones, and these too were shaped by his divine hands. Every throne bore its own design, tailored to the god who would sit upon it. They were not just seats, but symbols of dominion, each one telling the story of power through the curves of its arms and the strength of its base. They stood like anchors in the swirling energy of Olympus, reminding all who came of the order that held the world together. When the gods sat upon their thrones, it was not just in leisure or counsel, but in the ritual of power itself, and Hephaestus' hands had made that possible. Whether hidden in the private chambers of Hera, or in the open courts of Zeus's high hall, the thrones echoed his unmatched touch. His craft was never simply about making things. It was about shaping the very world the gods lived in, turning their desires and authority into objects that held meaning and might. Even in the mortal world, temples whispered his name, claiming possession of relics once forged in his fiery halls. Though centuries passed, the glint of his handiwork lived on, in jewels said to be touched by his fire, in weapons that never dulled, and in statues that seemed to breathe when struck by moonlight. Animated beings of metal, golden maidens who walked and served, and bronze bulls that roared with real breath. These were not myths, but the living memory of a god whose forge knew no boundary. The divine fire that burned within Hephaestus shaped not only the dwellings and thrones of the gods, but the very imagination of the world, making the unseen felt in iron, silver, and stone. Every nail and hinge, every polished surface and hidden bolt was a testament to his tireless hands, working endlessly in flame, spinning stories into steel, and leaving behind a world not just built, but born through the art of divine creation. Hera once made a promise, offering a bribe to Hypnos, the gentle bringer of sleep, and in that promise was a gift so precious it could not be ignored, a throne that would last forever, one that would never fade or break, a throne made entirely of gold, glowing with eternal brilliance. This throne was not to be ordinary, but extraordinary, a seat worthy of a god, designed by her own son, the one with the strong arms and unmatched skill, the master of forge and fire, who would shape it with great care and precise artistry. And beneath this throne, where rest would be taken and comfort found, he would place a footstool just as beautiful, crafted with the same golden shine, where the shining feet of the one who rested upon it could gently settle. But this same master of fire, when he was born, was cast down by Hera herself, rejected and hurled away. Yet he did not forget, and in his pain and anger he crafted something in return, not with fire and fury, but with patience and silent resolve. He made a chair that gleamed with gold and promised rest, but hidden within its beauty were bonds unseen, invisible fetters that could not be broken. When Hera sat upon this chair, she was trapped, unable to rise, held fast by the cleverness of her own son. Another tale tells how he fashioned not just one throne, but many, thrones of beauty and brilliance, for Zeus and the gods of Olympus, each shining and eternal. But the one he made for Hera was different. This one was made not of gold, but of adamant, the hardest substance, unbreakable and unyielding. The moment she sat upon it, she was lifted up, suspended in the air, caught in a trap of her own making, unable to free herself, a prisoner of the very seat she had accepted. In these acts, the god of the forge showed his power not only in creation, but in retribution, using his craft to deliver both honor and humiliation. In the quiet depths of his forge, surrounded by heat and glowing metal, he labored on other wonders. One of his greatest creations was a series of 20 tripods, each one destined to stand along the wall of his well-founded dwelling. These were not ordinary tripods for cooking or decoration. These were divine creations, given the ability to move by themselves, crafted with golden wheels set beneath their bases. By his design, they could glide into the halls of the gods without aid, wheel themselves into grand gatherings, and then, when all was done, return on their own to his house. They moved not with force, but with intention, a marvel to witness, like living things made from metal. Though most of their bodies were complete, their elaborate ear handles had yet to be finished, and he was still in the act of forging them, shaping the fine chains that would decorate their form. These objects were not just tools but miracles, each one a reminder of the god's ability to give motion and purpose to lifeless things. At the banquets of the immortals, these tripods moved freely, serving and adorning the gatherings, their presence a mark of wonder. They stood not only as works of craftsmanship, but as living examples of how divine skill could cross the boundary between object and will, and those who saw them could not help but be filled with awe. These creations were more than metal. They were part of the divine rhythm of Olympus. In the mortal world too, the mark of the forged god could be seen, especially in the palaces of those favored by the heavens. When the weary traveler arrived at the house of the king of the Phaeacians, he found not a simple home but a structure so magnificent that it seemed to glow with the light of the moon and sun. From the entrance to the far end of the hall, walls of bronze stretched in both directions, catching the light and gleaming with every step. Atop these walls, a frieze of deep blue enamel ran, adding color and elegance. The doors that closed the palace were gold, strong and shining, while silver posts stood firm on either side, rising above the threshold in perfect symmetry. The lintel, that top piece of the doorframe, was of silver too, smooth and flawless, and the handle itself gleamed with gold. Guarding this entrance, on either side of the door, stood 2 watchdogs, not made of flesh, but of gold and silver, shaped by the same hands that had crafted the thrones of the gods. These watchdogs were not ordinary statues, but magical beings, gifted with eternal life, never aging, never fading, always standing vigilant. They were protectors, forged by the master of metal, placed there to stand guard over the great house, a living testament to his cunning and craft. The palace was not merely a place to live, it was a living monument to divine favor, a fortress of beauty and protection shaped by divine hands. In another land, far to the east, the palace of a powerful king rose high, a place that drew the attention of heroes. When the seekers of glory arrived, they halted at the gate, struck still by the sight of what lay before them. The courtyard opened wide with its mighty gates, and the columns rose like trees, tall and soaring, lined up in proud ranks along the palace walls. Above all this, the marble cornice stood out against the sky, a sign of regal power and ancient skill. This too bore the touch of divine creation, for such majesty could only be born from the fire-lit hammer of the one who made wonders for both gods and kings. These palaces, whether high in Olympus or rooted in mortal soil, spoke the same language, the language of brilliance, precision, and power. They told of a god who did not rule with thunder or sea or sky, but with fire and metal, who shaped the world not through battle but through patience and art. Every throne, every moving tripod, every golden door and eternal watchdog stood as proof that greatness could be forged, not only born, and that even in silence, fire could speak. Through his work, the boundary between the divine and the mortal blurred, not with chaos but with beauty, not with destruction but with creation. Each artifact a line in the story of gods and kings, each one a quiet echo of the hammer that never ceased to fall. Resting upon bronze triglyphs that held the weight of the heavens in their design, the great palace stood tall and proud, a creation that bore the unmistakable touch of divine craftsmanship. When the travelers approached the courtyard, they crossed its threshold freely, no guards barring their way, for the magnificence of the place itself commanded reverence and awe. There, surrounding the outer courts, lush cultivated vines grew in splendid order, climbing and twisting high into the air, their greenery alive and rich, weaving through the structure as if nature had chosen to pay tribute to the skill of the master builder. Beneath the shelter of these vines, 4 wondrous springs flowed constantly, each one distinct and miraculous, crafted by the hand of the fire-born artisan whose genius knew no equal. The first spring poured forth milk, rich and white, forever fresh and never spoiling. The second sprang with wine, deep in color and sweet in scent, bubbling joyfully as though it knew it was the drink of the gods. The third flowed with fragrant oil, its golden surface shimmering with a soft glow, gliding smoothly like liquid sunlight. And the fourth was a spring of water, cool and clear, but with a secret nature. It changed with the sky. When the Pleiades vanished below the horizon, it grew warm, offering heat and comfort. But when the stars rose again into view, the same stream turned cold as ice, bubbling up from the hollow stone with crisp freshness. These marvels were not merely curiosities, they were signs, tokens of a promise and of gratitude. The one who made them had once fallen, his strength spent on a battlefield during a mighty clash between gods and giants. In that moment of weakness, the chariot of the sun came for him, lifting him up from the earth and carrying him away, saving him from ruin. And so, in return, the craftsman gave this palace to the son of the sun, shaping wonders into its foundations as a thank offering to the one who had saved him in his hour of need. In another place, beneath the surface of the earth where light seldom reached, a different kind of home was built, not in the open air or shining sky, but deep in shadow and silence. There, a king once dwelled, hidden away from the reach of enemies, protected not by walls but by the very earth itself. After being attacked by a giant who sought revenge, this king vanished underground, shielded by a house that had not been made by mortal hands. This hidden palace had been shaped by the same divine builder, who forged it in secret, its chambers safe and hidden, unseen by those who roamed above. There, beneath the ground, he lived beyond the reach of wrath, untouched by the vengeance of those who sought him. Far from these places, another wonder was once said to exist, a temple of bronze built for the god of light and prophecy. It was called the Third Temple, and its materials reflected the same brilliance used in other ancient works, such as the bronze bedchamber built long ago for a daughter whose father sought to lock her away. Temples of bronze were not unheard of. One still stood in the lands where warriors honored a goddess of wisdom and battle. So the idea of a bronze temple built for the god of Delphi seemed possible, even likely. Stories told that the divine smith had created it, fashioning its beauty and strength with fire and hammer. Above its highest point, golden figures were said to have sung, figures called the Golden Charmers, whose voices rang out in sweet harmony, their music echoing across the sacred hills. These tales were captured in verses, but not everyone believed them. Some thought the story of the singing figures was just an imitation of the songs sung by the sirens in other tales, not something that ever truly existed. As for the fate of the bronze temple, the stories could not agree. Some claimed it had vanished into a chasm, swallowed by the earth in a moment of divine will. Others said it had melted in fire, its brilliance lost in smoke and flame, never to be seen again. When the city of Troy fell and its treasures were divided among the victors, one of them received a chest, a box that seemed ordinary, but held within it an image of great power. It was a statue of the god of wine and festivity, said to have been shaped by the same hands that had crafted thrones and temples. The statue had not been made for just anyone. It was a gift from the king of the sky to the very first ruler of that ancient city, passed down through generations. The one who found it believed in its origin and carried it with care, knowing it had once stood in the heart of a kingdom. Others too believed it had come from the divine forge, though they did not display it, leaving its truth wrapped in silence. Among all the works said to have been made by that master of fire, some doubted their reality, thinking the stories were exaggerations. But one item was never questioned. The scepter of a great king, held in his hand as he ruled, was believed by many to be real, a true work of the god who shaped metal and flame. It stood not as a tale, but as a sign of power, a symbol that even poets and skeptics could not deny. Through palaces that flowed with wine and oil, through temples that echoed with golden song, through secret homes beneath the earth and sacred statues hidden in plain chests, the works of the divine craftsman stretched across both heaven and earth. Each one, whether seen or remembered only in story, bore the marks of his fire and skill, shaped with purpose, forged with care, and left behind as a reminder that even the strongest flame could shape wonders beyond imagination. From the high courts of kings to the deep roots of the earth, from doors that sang to thrones that held the mighty fast, his creations lived on, not just in stone and metal, but in the memory of gods and mortals alike. The high chariot of the sun, a divine marvel shining in the sky, stood as the greatest work of craftsmanship by the master of fire and forge. Its creation was not a simple task, but a true masterpiece, carefully shaped and polished with unmatched care. Every part of it gleamed with splendor, as the axle glowed with gold, the shaft sparkled with gold, and even the rolling circles of the tires were cast in brilliant gold, making it blaze with the same light it carried across the heavens. The spokes, arranged in perfect order, shimmered with silver, their polished surfaces reflecting light with every turn, and the harness that bound the mighty steeds of the sky bore intricate designs of radiant gemstones and shining chrysolites. These precious stones were not just decorations, but part of the glory that radiated from the chariot as it carried the sun across the sky, drawing the attention of all below. This shining vehicle, unlike any mortal creation, symbolized power and movement. a moving fire made of metal, designed by divine hands to carry light from one end of the world to the other. When the sun descended, it did not vanish into the sea, but was gently lifted and carried by another wonder of craftsmanship, a golden boat, hollow and winged, perfectly forged by the same divine hands. This bed of gold cradled the sun as it rested, floating silently on the surface of the waters, moving it gently from the far western edge, where the Hesperides watched the fading light, across the vast ocean to the lands of the morning in the east, where the Ethiopians would see it rise again. This boat, shaped not just for travel but for the sun's sleep, drifted each night over the waves, its wings carrying it silently and steadily above the surface, unhindered by wind or current, crafted with balance and grace, ensuring that the sacred fire would not be disturbed. In another telling, the vessel was not a boat, but a great bowl resting in the distant west, forged of shining metal by the same divine artisan, wide enough to carry the light bringer across the mighty stream that circled the world. As the darkness of night rose with her black horses, the sun would climb into this bowl, escaping the shadow and preparing once more for its daily journey across the skies. These were not ordinary vessels, but symbols of a cycle without end, shaped with skill and purpose, their forms holding the rhythm of day and night and the passage of time itself. In the heavens, another chariot was prepared, not for light, but for love, belonging to the goddess of beauty herself. When she could no longer find what she sought on earth, she looked to the skies and called for her chariot, which had once been a gift from the god of fire, lovingly finished by his careful hand as a token of union. The file had touched every curve, thinning the metal until it gleamed with a brilliance that outshone raw gold. The coach was so refined that its value could be measured by how much gold had been shaved away to make it perfect. The final result was not merely a vehicle, but a shining jewel on wheels, a chariot made for a goddess whose power was in charm and allure. 4 white doves, pure and graceful, were yoked to it, their feathers brushing against the jeweled harness, willing to lift the delicate carriage through the air with gentle flutters of their wings, carrying the goddess wherever she wished to go. The gift had not just been a wedding present, it was a work of art, shaped with care and love, proof of the power of creation, from a hand that understood metal and fire, as others understood music or words. On another side of the divine realm, a different chariot was being prepared, not one of peace or beauty, but one of war. The forge echoed with the hammering of the Cyclopes, working with great haste under the command of the master smith. They hurried to finish the chariot of the war god, one built for speed and destruction. Its wheels, fast and strong, were shaped to carry the rider across fields and nations, stirring the hearts of armies and lighting the fire of battle in the minds of men. This was no decorative piece, but a tool of war, designed to withstand the chaos of conflict and the thunder of charging horses. Its frame was strong, its motion swift, and every part of it served one purpose: to bring war wherever it rolled. Elsewhere, in the realm of secret gods known for their hidden powers and fiery nature, another chariot rolled forward. This one was driven by those whose eyes sparkled with their own flames, born from the smoke and embers of their father's forge. Their chariot was not made of gold or silver, but of adamant, a metal strong beyond compare, unbreakable and eternal. The colts that pulled it pounded the earth with hooves made of brass, their steps loud and sharp, sending dust flying as they moved. From their throats came no soft whinnies, but dry, metallic sounds, as though the heat inside them was trying to escape. They breathed fire from between their teeth, fierce and wild, and the one who guided them did so with reins made of flame, holding the fiery mouths of his steeds with a bridle that glowed hot in his hands. Every part of this creation was born from fire and metal, shaped with strength and a vision only the god of the forge could bring to life. But not all his works moved through the sky or land. Within his home, walking without command, were golden attendants shaped like living things. These statues were not statues in the ordinary sense, for they moved on their own, walking beside him as if they had minds and wills. They were shaped in the likeness of maidens, beautiful and bright, their forms shining with the glow of polished gold, their eyes open, and their limbs moving with perfect grace. They were creations not only of hands but of thought, made to serve, to move, to assist in silence, never tiring or failing. They stood as proof that even life could be mimicked by the careful work of fire and hammer. That movement could be born from metal when shaped by divine will. These golden attendants, like the chariots and vessels of the gods, were not only works of beauty, but of wonder, shaped with skill so great that even gods marveled at them. Each one carried the mark of its creator, the divine artisan, who shaped not only objects, but the very way gods and mortals moved through the world, whether riding through the sky, floating across oceans, charging into battle, or walking beside their maker. These works stood as quiet reminders that fire, in the right hands, could make the impossible real. He picked up a heavy stick in his hand and limped slowly toward the doorway, the weight of his movement echoing through the chamber, and behind him, in silent, graceful rhythm, came his attendants. These were not ordinary helpers, but golden beings crafted in the image of young women, shaped with divine care and intention. They were not lifeless statues, but creations with intelligence, capable of thought and gifted with speech. Within them, strength pulsed as if from a living core, and they had learned the tasks they performed not through repetition, but through knowledge bestowed upon them by the immortal gods themselves. Their limbs moved with purpose, and as they stirred nimbly, they came to assist their master without command, surrounding him in a soft ring of shimmering gold as he approached the seated goddess. In another place, it was said that the same divine smith had crafted more such handmaids, sculpted out of gold and given breath, not in a symbolic sense, but in the truest meaning. Gold that breathed as if alive, metal that had been taught to mimic the rhythm of life. These marvels were not simply tools or ornaments, but living reflections of divine power made tangible in the form of golden motion. Guarding the palace of a king were creatures of similar brilliance, watchdogs placed on each side of the great doors. These were not ordinary beasts, but eternal guardians, forged from gold and silver, shaped with such skill that they stood as both art and defense. They were deathless and ageless, untouched by time, never weakening, never sleeping. The master of the forge had shaped them not with brute force, but with cunning and wit, creating sentinels that would forever watch over the entrance to the grand home. Some said they resembled griffins, fierce in their silent vigil, their eyes fixed forward as though they could see every soul that approached. Their presence alone was enough to strike awe in the hearts of those who passed, knowing that they were under the watchful eye of guardians born from flame and metal. Elsewhere, under the sky of a distant land, a king possessed creatures far more terrifying, forged not for beauty or calm protection, but for raw power and fear. These were the bronze bulls, beasts of immense size and terrible strength, whose hooves were not flesh but hammered bronze, hard and deadly. From their mouths, instead of breath, came fire, blazing and uncontrollable. a stream of heat that scorched the air and threatened all who dared draw near. These monsters were not born but built gifts from the same divine maker, offered to the king as symbols of his might. The challenge laid before a hero was to tame these creatures, to yoke them and drive them forward as if they were oxen, but their nature was wild and their form forged for chaos. In some tellings, the same divine smith had not only made the bulls, but had given the king a plough as well, one made of hardened steel, shaped in a single piece without flaw, ready to tear through the earth if only the beast could be controlled. The bulls, known as the brazen-footed ones, bore collars that burned and poles that glowed with heat, their very harness aflame, their breath a weapon. The artistry that created them was not for peace, but for fire and fury, and they stood as proof of a hand that could make even destruction beautiful. Further across the sea, on another island, a different kind of guardian roamed. This was not a bull or a beast, but a giant made entirely of bronze, a single living statue that protected the land with tireless energy. He had been given to the king of that island, a gift from the same forge, and within his hollow body ran a single vein, stretching from his neck to his ankle, a delicate thread that carried his lifeblood, sealed at the end with a bronze stud, a simple piece that held his power together. This giant ran around the island 3 times a day, his steps loud and relentless, patrolling its shores without pause. His presence alone deterred invaders, for he was unstoppable, a figure of strength and vigilance, bound not by hunger or fatigue, but only by the stud that sealed his life within. He needed no orders, no rest, no sleep. He simply ran round and round, guarding his land with the same tireless rhythm as the sun in the sky, and all who saw him knew that this was not the work of mortals, but of hands that could bring motion to metal. In the sacred place of Delphi, there once stood a temple of bronze, a structure that echoed with the stories of the gods. Some said it was the work of the same divine artisan, and within its pediment sang the golden charmers, statues not silent but melodic. These figures, shaped from gold, lifted their voices in song, filling the air above the temple with sweet music. The stories of their voices were passed down through verse, and though some questioned their truth, their legend remained, tied forever to the bronze structure they adorned. Their song was said to enchant, to echo like the call of the sirens, not to lure to doom but to lift the soul toward the divine. They stood as a symbol that even sound could be sculpted, that music could be held in place and given form by fire and gold. On the heights of punishment, where chains held the bound and eagles descended from the sky, another creation performed its dark task. It was a bird, but not of feather and bone. This eagle was sent to punish, to feed each day on the suffering of one who defied the gods. Some said this eagle too had been made by the same hand, forged to be relentless, its talons sharp with metal, its wings beating without rest. Day after day it came, its hunger never-ending, its task eternal, its body crafted not by nature, but by a will that knew how to make pain endure. If it was indeed born from the forge, then it too stood as a creation of purpose, an instrument not of beauty or protection, but of judgment. From golden women who walked and spoke, to bulls that breathed fire, from unaging guardians and singing statues to bronze giants and eagles of punishment, all these were the works of a single hand, a hand that could shape gold to breathe, bronze to run, silver to guard, and flame to serve. Each creation was more than just a marvel. It was a piece of will made solid, a fusion of thought, fire, and form, each one living beyond time, untouched by age, standing forever as proof that metal in the right hands, could move, sing, guard, and even burn. He sent an eagle to the chained figure on the lonely peak of the great mountain, a creature of piercing eyes and terrible hunger, whose purpose was not mercy but punishment. Each day the eagle came, its wings stretched wide against the cold sky, to feast upon the liver of the one who defied the will of the gods. But the cruel beauty of this torment was that the liver grew back every night, whole again, ready for the eagle's return with the dawn. This eternal cycle was not left to nature alone, for many believed that the eagle itself had not been born of egg or nest, but made by the hand of the divine smith. Forged in fire and shaped by hammer, the creature had been given life not by breath, but by the command of the king of the gods, who animated the lifeless metal and sent it to perform its relentless task. This winged enforcer was a creation of vengeance, a symbol of wrath shaped not with words but with flame and metal, its purpose etched into every feather and claw. In another corner of the divine world, sparks danced in the eyes of fiery children whose very bloodline came from the forge. These were riders not of calm steeds, but of wild colts whose hooves were made of brass and whose throats released dry, rasping cries. They were the sons of flame, and they rode in a chariot not made of wood or leather, but of adamant, a metal stronger than thought and harder than stone. Their father had made the colts with the same inimitable skill he gave to all his works, crafting their teeth to breathe fire and their mouths to glow with a defiant heat. One of the riders held the reins, fiery and wild, guiding the flaming mouths of the iron-hoofed beasts with strength and mastery. In his right hand he gripped a spear forged upon his father's anvil, and at his side hung a sword so finely wrought that even the lightest touch of stone against its blade sent sparks flying into the air, as if the steel longed to return to the flame from which it came. Another carried a bolt of fire in his hand, unthrown yet alive with energy, ready to strike. These were not mere warriors, but the living proof that the fire-born god could shape not only tools and thrones but blood and fury, turning metal into power and children into thunder. In the halls of the gods and the hearts of mortals, beauty was no less important than strength, and the god of fire had turned his hands to finer things as well. He crafted intricate objects, bending pins into loops, curving clasps to fit perfectly, and shaping cups that gleamed in the light. He worked delicate necklaces with hands that once shaped chariots and giants, proving that fire could be both fierce and gentle. Each link, each twist of gold, was a line in a silent song of craftsmanship, quiet yet shining with divine perfection. These were not objects for display alone, but tokens of love, of promises, and of the closeness between gods and those they favored. When one of those closest to the god of wine was to be honored, it was a crown that carried her name into the stars. The crown had once been a gift from the forge god, passed from one divine hand to another until it rested on the brow of a bride. And when the time came for her story to be written in the heavens, the crown was lifted and transformed. Its 9 gems did not fade, but became 9 stars, and the gold that once graced her head now circled the sky as a constellation, shining forever as a monument not only to her, but to the hands that had shaped the crown. The fire that forged it was no longer in the forge but in the sky, glowing as a gift of memory and light. Another crown, made for the first woman formed from clay, held wonders of its own. It was placed upon her head as a finishing touch, a final stroke of beauty before she stepped into the world. The god of the forge made it himself, not with haste but with deep care, as a favor to the king of the gods. Its surface was alive with detail, filled with countless creatures of land and sea, all shaped into gold, yet appearing almost alive. Some were said to have voices, and though they could not speak, their forms told stories that only the careful eye could see. It was more than decoration. It was a world in miniature, a silent poem in metal, a crown that caught the light and held it, shining with such beauty that it could silence words. This was the final gift placed upon the first woman, a reminder of the wonder and danger that beauty could hold. And there was the necklace, given not in jest or for charm, but as a wedding gift. It was made by the fire-born god, perhaps with purpose, perhaps as a token of fate. Given to a bride, it hung heavy not only with gold but with destiny. Each link was forged with the same fire that shaped the weapons of war and the chains of punishment. The necklace passed through generations, bringing with it a silent weight, tied to sorrow and change. Yet it remained, gleaming with the light of its making, and with each hand that held it, the story of its creation was told again, not in words, but in the glint of the metal and the whisper of the past. And there were more pieces, more works, more wonders shaped by the hands that never tired. Pins and crowns, chariots and bulls, eagles and giants, all flowed from the same forge, born not of nature but of will, of vision, and of flame. Each one held a purpose, each one told a story, whether to guard, to burn, to punish, to shine, or to live. Each creation stood as proof that the divine fire could shape not just the world around it, but the very course of time, linking gods and mortals through metal, heat, and the quiet, eternal work of hands that shaped destiny one strike at a time. A golden necklace, bright and beautiful, was once given as a reward for a dark deed, a payment not only for the destruction of a father, but also for securing the fall of a son. The one who accepted it had already received a robe as a price for that second betrayal, sealing her fate with both garments of beauty and symbols of sorrow. Long ago, the story says, the necklace and the robe had not been created for such grim purposes. They had first been gifts from the goddess of love, offered in celebration to a bride named Harmonia, a symbol of joy and divine union. But beauty, even when shaped by love, can carry shadow, and the gifts that began as tokens of blessing came to be known for bringing misfortune. The poets and the storytellers, those who remembered the old tales, agreed that many great works had been made by the hands of the divine smith, whose fire and forge had given form to wonders. But of all these, few were said to be genuine. One work alone, the scepter of a great king, stood out as unquestionably real, held as proof of the smith's skill by those who still told tales of the old world. In a far-off land, in a city sacred to the goddess of beauty and her lost beloved, there was an ancient sanctuary. There, they claimed, lay a necklace once belonging to Harmonia, though now more often called the Necklace of the Betrayer, named after the woman who had taken it in exchange for her husband's life. The tale of how that necklace came to the temple had been told in earlier histories, tracing its path through treachery, theft, and sacred dedication. It was once offered at the great temple of prophecy, laid down by those who believed it too dangerous to be kept among mortals. But nothing stays still, and tyrants from a neighboring land took it away. Still, even in distant lands, people tried to say they had it, pointing to necklaces made of green stones set in gold. But this could not have been the true one, for the real necklace, as described by the ancient poets, was pure gold, no coloured stones, no false sparkle, only the weight and glow of the precious metal. One poet, the oldest of them all, simply called it gold, given as the price of a husband's life. He said nothing of stones, and those who came after him held fast to his words, doubting the truth of the necklace said to lie in that foreign shrine. There was another version of the tale, told by those who looked to the gods for meaning in every gift and every curse. They said that the child born of an affair between the goddess of love and the god of war was given a wedding gift by the goddess of wisdom and the master of the forge. A robe and necklace were their offering, made not with joy, but with a knowledge of what was to come. The necklace, they whispered, had been dipped in crime, steeped in the wrongs that would stain those who wore it. And so it happened that the bloodline born from this union was marked with misfortune. The curse carried not through words or vengeance, but through the gift itself, as if each link in the necklace held a silent promise of sorrow. Even in the poems of the later ages, the story remained. One bride, on the day she married the doomed son of a king, wore the very same necklace, still gleaming with its cursed beauty. The gift was given by her husband, but its power stretched far back into the past. It was no ordinary ornament, but the dreadful necklace of Harmonia, and though time had passed, the curse had not faded. The story of how it came to be was well known, and those who heard it shivered at its telling. It was said that the god of fire, still wounded by betrayal, long tormented by the knowledge of his wife's affair, decided to act not with rage but with craft. Though punishment had come and gone, though chains had once held the guilty, there had been no true justice. So on the day of the wedding, when joy filled the air and love was meant to shine, he made the necklace with his own hands, not as a gift of peace, but as a trap of fate. Though he was known for shaping tools of war, homes of the gods, and wonders of strength, this work he made with care beyond all others. The Cyclops, his helpers of flame and iron, labored at his side, and even the craftsmen known for their dark skills, the ancient ones who could shape magic with metal, joined in the work. Together they formed a circlet of jewels, each one more perfect than the last, but hidden within their glow was fire that burned from within. Emeralds, it was said, that held a secret flame and a core of adamant marked with strange and haunting images. Gorgon eyes stared out from the surface, fixed in eternal warning, and the embers from a thunderbolt's final strike, still hot from the Sicilian anvil, were pressed into the metal. Twisting around the band were serpent crests, their green scales gleaming, their forms alive with coiled threat. And within it all, wrapped tight in gold, were the fruits of the far-off garden, where the daughters of night once stood watch over treasures forbidden to mortals. The necklace held beauty, but it also held power, the kind of power that does not rest or fade. It did not need a curse spoken aloud, for the curse was in the making, in the way each piece was placed, in the anger and pain that shaped it. Those who wore it shone like queens, but sorrow followed their steps, as if the necklace whispered to fate itself, drawing misfortune to those it touched. And so the gift passed from hand to hand, from bride to bride, from daughter to mother, always glowing, always wanted, yet always bringing ruin. It was not thrown away, for it was too beautiful. It was not destroyed, for it was too rare. Instead, it lingered, waiting for the next to wear it, for the next story to unfold. And those who saw it could never tell whether it was a blessing or a curse, only that it had once come from the forge of a god, shaped in fire, sealed with sorrow, and carried through time by those who could not resist its shine. And the dread gold of Phrixus's fleece, gleaming with the memory of flight and sacrifice, was forged into the very heart of the gift, woven into the terrible necklace alongside other curses hidden in beauty. This piece was not simply made for ornament, but designed with careful cruelty, as diverse plagues were intertwined within its golden length, every twist of metal concealing a deeper shadow. The king, adder, cruel and coiled, was pulled from the snarled hair of a fury, its power still flickering in the strands of gold. Into this, the wicked charm of the girdle, known far and wide for its ability to bend the will and desire of gods and men alike, was added to the metalwork, not as a decoration, but as an element of dangerous power. And around all these things, the maker poured moonlit foam, as if to cool the fire within, and then bathed the entire piece in the poison of delight, a sweetness too powerful for safety. It was not crafted by soft hands, not by grace nor charm, nor even by the youth of longing, who so often played in the hearts of gods. No, this necklace was formed by grief, by rage, by pain, by conflict, each one a shadow standing behind the fire, guiding the craftsman's hand. The fingers of anguish shaped its edge, and the touch of discord curled around its coils. This was not a gift of joy, but a trap of sorrow wrapped in the glitter of treasure. The necklace first revealed its true purpose when the one it had adorned cried out, and her voice cracked not with grief but with hissing, as her body twisted and lengthened and fell to the ground. Harmonia, once a bride, now cruel beside her husband, no longer walking but dragging herself across the fields, her form a serpent's, her chest drawing long furrows in the soil as they crept through Illyria together, not man and wife, but creatures of scaled sorrow. And the gift's work was not yet done. Not long after, another woman, who had once been bold, wrapped the jewel around her neck, and no sooner had she done so than the goddess of vengeance entered her home. That same necklace, heavy with fate, sat shining at her throat as ruin approached. Another tale told of a queen named Jocasta, who once wore that same beauteous thing, her face lifted with pride as the light played on its gold. But what bed did it bring her to? What favor did it buy? A gift so fair, yet always followed by ruin, leaving behind not joy but ashes, and still more followed. The necklace passed from hand to hand, each new bearer thinking it a treasure, only to find that its beauty was a veil hiding despair. At last it came to another woman, who wore it not with fear but with triumph. Argia, proud and shining, surpassed her sister, not in grace, but in ornament, the golden gift catching every flicker of light and reflecting it back tenfold. And even then, it did not rest. One woman watched from afar, consumed by envy, seeing the necklace at every feast, at every shrine, its terrible gleam drawing her eyes and her heart. The wife of a doomed prophet, she longed for the jewel with all the hunger that love could not quiet, wishing again and again that it might be hers, not knowing that possession would bring her nothing but ruin. But what good did her desire do her? The necklace profited no one. It remained what it had always been, a thing of pain wrapped in gold. In another telling, the beginning of this chain of sorrow lay with the goddess of love herself, who in the clever depths of her heart sought to please the god of war. Wanting to delight him, she chose a gift not of words but of gold, and took the necklace into her hands, setting it gently around the neck of their daughter on the day of her marriage. The work itself was flawless, its gemstones glittering in a way that caught every eye, each cut precise and glowing. The one who had made it had done so with care and skill, the same divine craftsman who had shaped many things before. He had forged it not only for the daughter, but first for the goddess he had married, believing then that their union would bring him peace. He had thought she would give him a child in his own image, one who bore the limp he carried, the slow steps he knew, but instead She had given birth to a boy with wings on his heels and laughter in his eyes, whole and swift and not at all like him. And in that moment, the craftsman had turned his fire to the metal and shaped the necklace with a heart full of both pain and skill. The shape he gave it was no simple circle. It was like a serpent, coiled and alive, its back marked with stars, its form curling in loops of perfect gold. It wound like the two-headed snake known to slither both ways, a creature that could twist and move in opposite directions, its fangs biting from both ends. So too did the necklace twist, its golden spine bending, its necks rising and meeting at the center. Its mouths, 2 in number, faced each other across the chest, the scales along its body glinting like wet fire. Through the clever joints in the metal, the circle flexed and moved, seeming almost to breathe, as if the thing itself were alive. The heads of the serpent opened wide, and though no breath came forth, a sound did rise, a low hiss, faint and cold, like the echo of a curse in the wind. With every movement the necklace shimmered and hissed, not in fury, but in warning, and those who wore it could never say they did not feel it whisper. And so, from the hands of a betrayed husband, born in a forge filled with flame, passed down by the one who had caused the betrayal, placed around the neck of a daughter unaware, the necklace began its path through time. With every new owner, its beauty grew, but so did its shadow. Each gem, each scale, each spark of gold held more than light. It held the weight of tears not yet shed, of voices soon to cry out, of footsteps destined to turn to slithering trails in the dust. It was not made of curses, but it carried them all the same. A thing dipped in delight, but steeped in grief. A gift of splendor and of sorrow. A golden serpent coiled around the neck, beautiful, shining, alive, and never, ever innocent. Side by side, where the beginning met the end, the golden serpent coiled and circled, its 2 heads rising from either end of the twisting necklace until they came together in the center. Between them, suspended as if in flight, a golden eagle was placed upright, as though it were cutting through the sky. Its wings spread wide, not 2, but 4 in number, each carved with stones of different kinds, each gleaming with their own unique light. The first wing was covered in yellow jasper, glowing with a warmth like dawn breaking through mist. The second shone with the soft white of moonstone, which seemed to dim and brighten depending on how the light struck it. Just like the moon itself, fading when the horned goddess wanes and growing full again when she returns in her brightness, pouring out the silver fire born from the sun himself. The third wing sparkled with pearl, its glow gentle yet vivid, casting a shimmer like sunlight dancing across the waves of the wide Erythraean Sea, making its grey swells shine like polished glass. The fourth wing, different from the rest, held the Indian agate, and from this deep stone came a softer light, fluid and glowing, casting beauty without burning, bright but tender, like a flame trapped in calm water. At the center, where the eagle soared, the jaws of the twin serpents opened wide, their fangs arching back, their mouths stretching as if to devour the bird. But they did not close. Instead, they curved around the eagle from both sides, enclosing it but never harming it, like a challenge held still in gold. Their eyes were filled with rubies, and from these deep red stones burst out a sharp light, not steady, but flickering like the flame of a lamp suddenly lit, fierce and sudden. The serpents watched the eagle eternally, and the necklace, though silent, held a tension that felt alive, as if the eagle might break free or the jaws might finally close. Below this central battle of shapes and symbols, the necklace spread into a wide display of carved sea and stone. a sea of jewels unfurled, rich with many colours and textures. Emerald stones, deep grass green, were cut and set next to crystal pieces, so clear they shimmered like sea foam, and the two together made an image of green water turning white with spray. The clever craftsmanship did not end there. The ocean itself seemed to ripple across the surface, and from it golden sea creatures leapt and sparkled. The creatures of the deep, fishes, serpents and dolphins, danced along the necklace as if alive. One dolphin arched its back in motion, its body curving naturally, tail flipping as though moved by real water. Its tail fin was made so skillfully that it seemed to waggle with its own mind, shimmering in the light, playing among the others, half seen like something glimpsed beneath the waves. Alongside them were birds, sculpted in many colours, with wings frozen in mid-beat, feathers carved with such detail that the eye could almost see them fluttering. They were so lifelike that one might almost imagine the soft rush of wind as their wings flapped, as if sound could rise from stone when the goddess of love gave this glorious necklace to her daughter on her wedding day. It was not only a gift of beauty, but a complete world strung together. A living thing captured in gold and stone, hanging gently against the bride's neck. The craftsman, limping and weary from work and betrayal, held the necklace still warm from the furnace, new and not yet cooled. The air around it still breathed with heat and spark. He had already, though he wished otherwise, cast away his first bride, for he had seen her laughing in the arms of another. His heart had broken, but his hands still worked. He took his sorrow and poured it into the gold, shaping every detail not only with skill, but with pain, letting the fire of the forge reflect the fire within him. This necklace, though made as a gift, was marked with that feeling, even in its perfection. Every coil of the serpent, every feather of the eagle, every fin of the dolphin was shaped by the same hand, and though the work was faultless, it held a silent echo of the one who made it. Elsewhere, in the halls of kings, other vessels bore the same touch. A great mixing bowl, made entirely of silver with a rim of gold, rested in the house of a king returned from war. He had received it as a gift during his long journey home, and he spoke of it with pride. Of all the treasures he possessed, it was this one he chose to give, a bowl made by the hands of the same divine craftsman. Its surface gleamed with soft light, heavy and cool to the touch, a thing not just for function, but for honor. When he offered it, he called it the most beautiful of all he owned. And when the greatest warrior of the age fell in battle, the mourning that followed was not only in voices, but in the things left behind. His bones were placed in a golden urn, an amphora with 2 handles, given by the god of wine, but made by the god of fire. It was not just a container, but a resting place, a sacred object for a sacred hero. The golden urn held both the warrior and his closest companion, their ashes mixed together. In another telling, a silver casket was used, just as fine, just as heavy, carried by those who still grieved. Even after fire had taken his flesh, the vessel that held his bones was crafted with the same hands that made thrones for gods and weapons for legends. It was shaped with fire, cooled with care, and held with reverence. And so the necklace, with its eagle and serpent, its sea and sky, passed into the world. It was beauty, and it was story. It was not only a gift, but a memory of love, of betrayal, of fire and loss. Its wings still gleamed with jasper, moonstone, pearl, and agate. Its eyes still burned with ruby fire. Its dolphin still leapt, its bird still fluttered. And when it hung on the neck of a bride, it was more than gold. It was a song of flame, of sorrow, of hands that shaped the divine. And though it did not speak, it carried a voice. The voice of the forge, the voice of the maker, the voice of the fire that never went out, laid massy and deep, and banded and bestarred with flashing gold, and the daughters of Nereus, the sea god, gathered around with grace and sorrow, shedding ambrosia over the place where the hero's remains were laid. They brought with them rare and fragrant oils, pouring precious nard in honor of the one who had burned bright and fallen young. Over the bones of the mighty-hearted warrior, they poured fat from cattle and golden amber honey, as if trying to sweeten the silence of death with gifts of the earth's richness. His mother, sorrowful but proud, brought forth a golden vase, an urn not of ordinary craft, but one shaped in ancient times by the hands of the god of wine and made by the great firesmith himself. It was in this shining vessel that they placed the casket which held the bones of the hero, and the urn itself seemed to glow from within, reflecting the heat of battle and the quiet of death alike. The metal bore no inscription, but its weight spoke of honor, its smooth surface catching light like flame trapped in stillness. A silent tribute made by divine hands. In a distant city, another bowl held another story. A king of Troy, old and weary, held in his hands a chalice deep and wide, raised high in honor and farewell. It was no simple drinking cup, but a huge golden crater, a vessel with a history carved as much into legend as into its rim. It had first been made by the fire god and brought as a gift to the king of gods himself. On the day the forge god had been given a bride, the cup had been presented as a masterpiece. Zeus, in his might, had passed it down to his son Dardanos, then gave it to Erichthonios, and from him it passed to Tros, whose heart was as great as his name. From Tros it came into the hands of Elos, and Ilos gave it to Laomedon, who entrusted it at last to Priam. It was a treasure of Troy, passed through generations, always meant to go from father to son. But fate is not bound by plans, and this chalice too, like its keepers, would meet a different end. It shone in the light, held high by a trembling hand, a relic of glory and loss, a vessel that had once held the favor of gods, and now carried the memory of grief. On the island of Lemnos, another pair of bowls told a different tale. At the funeral games held for the fallen warrior, the goddess of the sea, dark-robed and mourning, brought out two great silver craters, polished bright and reflecting the flames of the pyre. These bowls had once been given by a king's son to ransom a captive, and the story of their path was as winding as the sea from which they came. They had first been crafted by the firesmith for the wine god, a wedding gift on the day he brought his new bride to Olympus. That bride had once been left on an island by a forgetful lover, and in that place she had been found and taken up by the god of wine, who poured nectar into the bowls and blessed them. In time, he gave them to his son, who passed them to another, and finally they came into the hands of the warrior, who gave them in exchange for her life. Now, at the edge of morning, they were offered again, their silver surface flashing in the light of day, carrying within them not wine or honey, but the weight of memory. One was taken by a descendant of heroes, the other carried with joy to a ship, as if to preserve a spark of the hero who had gone. In a temple far away, yet another bowl stood still. This one, made of bronze, was shown to visitors by priests, who claimed it had once been dedicated by a hero and made by the fire god himself. It stood quietly among other relics, and though poets sang of its origin, others doubted the tale, pointing to mortal names, to craftsmen of old who had first melted bronze and shaped it with care. Still, the bowl stood there, heavy with stories, marked with the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the touch of a god had once shaped its rim. But not all of the smith's works were made for beauty or for honor. When he learned of betrayal in his own home, he turned his fire to forge not art but vengeance. In anger and hurt, he laid his great anvil upon the floor and began to work, not with love or duty, but with fury. He shaped chains not to bind the limbs of soldiers or the necks of beasts, but to catch lovers in their hidden act. These chains could not be broken, could not be torn, could not be escaped. They were made with cunning, twisted with thought and patience, designed to trap not just bodies, but shame itself. When the work was done, he laid them in place, invisible and ready, and when they were sprung, they held tight. This was no accident of rage, but a careful plan, shaped by fire, cooled in silence, and set with the skill of one who knew the strength of metal better than the strength of hearts. These chains, like the bowls and urns, like the craters and vessels, bore his touch, and in their grip was the same mastery, the same fire, the same finality. And so the works of the firesmith stretched far and wide, across lands and generations, across joy and sorrow. His hands shaped gold and silver, forged bronze and iron, not only for gods, but for heroes, for kings, for the fallen and the forgotten. His chains held shame, his urns held ashes, his bowls held wine and tears alike, and each one, whether laid in temples or passed through bloodlines, whether raised in toast or set down in grief, held within it not just metal, but memory. Memory of fire, of craft, of a god who worked not with thunder or sea, but with the quiet spark of forge and flame. He went quietly into the room where the bed was kept, and around the tall posts of that bed he laid the chains, working with care and silence, placing them so skillfully that they could not be seen. From the beams above, more chains were suspended, countless and delicate, finer than spider silk and lighter than woven mist, so carefully forged that even the blessed gods, with all their sharp vision and divine senses, could not notice their presence. The work had taken thought, patience, and the finest touch, and every loop and twist was made by a hand that understood both strength and subtlety. Once he had finished his task and left the room, another entered, unaware of the trap that had been prepared. The one who came was drawn by desire, longing for the embrace of the goddess who was the joy of many hearts. So he made his way to the dwelling of the great craftsman, thinking he would be alone with her. Together they came to the bed and lay down, wrapped not in love but in illusion. For no sooner had they moved than the hidden chains responded. They sprang to life, tightening, binding, twisting around their limbs with unyielding grip. They could not raise an arm, nor turn, nor free themselves. They lay trapped, held fast by bonds they could not see or break, realizing too late that they had been caught. There was no escape, no undoing the snare once it had sprung. They could only lie still, helpless and exposed, caught in the delicate web made not of thread but of metal, a net of countless meshes woven with divine skill. The toils were many, wrapped tight in 1,000 loops, and the shame of their capture clung to them as firmly as the bonds. Others also told the tale, describing the same moment from different voices. One wrote that the god of fire, upon discovering the secret meetings of his wife and her hidden lover, knew he could not match strength with the one who had taken what was his. So he turned instead to craft, making a trap of adamant, the hardest metal, forming it into a chain so fine that it seemed not even to exist. He placed this chain around the bed, knowing it would hold fast those who thought they came for pleasure. And when the time came, the pair entered the chamber and fell into the snare together, caught so closely that they could not separate. There was no power strong enough to break the chain, no cleverness to undo its clasp. It had been forged in silence, in pain, in quiet anger, and it did its work without fault. Another told of how the craftsman, betrayed in love, chose not to rage or strike, but to forge. He made a net, a mesh of bronze links so thin and delicate that they were invisible even to the gods. It was a net so fine that not even the finest silk could rival it, nor the careful weaving of the spider's web that hung in the beams of old houses. It responded to the slightest touch, to the faintest breath, and he placed it around the bed with such care that it seemed like air itself. When the moment came and the pair lay together, the net did not wait. It leapt up around them, tightened, and held them where they lay, caught not only in their passion, but in their shame. It was not just a trap of metal, but a mirror of their guilt, made visible in the snare they could not flee. Elsewhere, there was another set of chains made also by the firesmith, but for a different purpose. These were not meant to shame, but to punish. They were the adamantine chains used to bind the one who had brought fire to men. Forged with strength beyond breaking, they held their prisoner against the rock, fastened him for an eternity of suffering. Each link had been shaped with precision, and once in place, they did not rust, did not fade, did not move. They were as eternal as the punishment they delivered, a reminder of the cost of rebellion, of the price of giving to mortals what the gods had withheld. But not all of the smith's work was made for wrath. One of the most honored objects he ever made was a scepter. This scepter, carefully wrought, was given first to the king of the gods. From his hand, it passed to the swift messenger, who then gave it to a mortal son of a god. That man, known for his skill with horses, gave it in turn to another, and so the scepter moved through generations. From one ruler to the next, it traveled, held by Atreus, then by Thyestes, and finally by Agamemnon, who stood tall and proud, holding it as a symbol of his command. It was no ordinary staff, but a sign of power, of lineage, of rule handed down from divine hands to mortal kings. It shone with quiet strength, its metal cool and firm, its shape unchanged by time. Those who held it ruled not only with voice or sword, but with the authority that came from the touch of the fire gods forge. Even far from the centers of power, the scepter was remembered. In one city, the people held it in the highest honor, saying that it had been made for the king of gods, given to the messenger, passed down to rulers of the earth. The story did not change, even when the names did. The shape remained the same, the weight of its history resting in the hands of each new bearer. It had seen many wars, many feasts, many decisions. It had pointed to victories, to punishments, to borders drawn and broken, and always behind it was the hand that had shaped it first, the hand that knew metal and flame and silence. So through nets and chains, through urns and craters, through scepters and traps, the firesmith's work stretched across the stories of gods and men. In every link, in every twist of gold or bronze or adamant, there was care, there was pain, there was silence and fire. Whether it bound lovers in shame or kings in power, whether it held ashes or spilled wine, it bore the same mark, the mark of hands that shaped not only metal but fate. Agamemnon had received the scepter from Thyestes, and this same scepter, once held in the hands of kings and touched by the gods, came to be worshipped not simply as an object, but as something divine in its own right. The people who honored it called it the spear, and the power it carried was more than symbolic. They believed it held something greater, something holy, and this belief was not based on mere tradition, but on the way the fame of the scepter brought honor to their city, a fame that spread far and wide and marked them as chosen. It was said to have been found on the border between their land and a neighboring region, a place where they claimed gold was once discovered, yet they did not take the gold. Instead, they chose to keep the scepter, valuing it more than any treasure dug from the ground. According to the tale passed down through generations, the scepter had come to their land through the daughter of Agamemnon, a woman named Electra, who had carried it with her, and thus it was kept and guarded ever since. Though no temple had been built in its name, a priest was chosen each year to take the scepter into his home, where he would care for it and tend to it like a living god. Each day, offerings were made, and beside it was laid a table filled with food, meat, and cakes of all kinds, as if the scepter could see and receive the gifts given in its honor. Poets had spoken often of the many things created by the god of fire, and many items across the land were claimed to be his handiwork. But in the view of many, only the scepter of Agamemnon was truly his work, real and undeniable. All other relics might be legend, but this one, held and honored, stood as proof of his craft. In the halls of ancient Troy, another creation of the same divine smith had once stood, a golden vine, a gift from the king of gods. It had been made not by accident, but as a token of repayment, crafted to be beautiful and full of meaning. The vine was covered in soft leaves of shining gold and heavy with golden clusters of grapes, each one perfect, never fading, blooming as if alive. The god of fire had made it with care, and when it was done, he gave it to his father, the king of the sky. That same father, in turn, gave it as a gift to a king named Laomedon, to settle the debt for taking his son, a boy of great beauty, to dwell among the immortals. The vine became a symbol not only of repayment, but of divine craftsmanship, made by hands that shaped metal to seem like life, and given by gods as payment for gods. Elsewhere, in the stories of heroes, one tale told of a simple tool with great power. There was a time when a great hero struggled to deal with a swarm of dangerous birds who nested by a lake. They were fierce and could not be reached easily, and no ordinary method would work. But then, a goddess helped him by giving him bronze rattles, forged by the same divine smith who had shaped the thrones of heaven and the weapons of gods. These rattles, though small, were powerful, for when the hero shook them from the mountaintop, their sound echoed loudly across the lake and startled the birds into flight. The birds rose from their hiding places, frightened by the sharp ringing, and the hero was finally able to deal with them. The noisemakers, made of bronze, were simple but effective, showing that even the smallest creation of the fire god could turn the tide of a story. In another tale, there was a man known for his craft, a carpenter by trade, who had once been given an axe by the same god. This axe had become an important part of his work, helping him shape wood with great skill. But his life took a strange turn, and he was eventually transformed into a bird by the gods. Because he had been a woodworker, the bird he became was the woodpecker, a creature that taps on trees with a beak like an axe. It was said that the axe had been a gift from the fire god, and even in his new form, the carpenter kept that connection, now forever known as a sign of good luck to other woodworkers. The weapons made for the gods themselves were also said to be the works of this master of metal. When the twin children of a goddess gave their first cries, they were not left without arms. On the day they were born beneath the branches of an olive tree, the fire god gave them arrows, gifts not of decoration but of destiny. and only 4 days after they came into the world, one of them took those arrows and used them to bring down a great serpent, avenging his mother and marking his strength before he had even grown. The arrows, simple in form but divine in power, were made for hands that would never miss, shaped by the same force that forged stars and crowns. There was also the thunderbolt, the great weapon of the Sky King, shaped in the fires beneath a burning mountain. Deep under the peaks of Etna, where furnaces raged day and night, the fire god tended his forge, creating bolts that split the sky in 3-pronged fury. These were not symbols or toys, but real weapons of lightning, hurled from heaven to earth in flashes of divine wrath. The hammer fell, and with each strike a bolt took shape, glowing with the fury of storm and judgment. These thunderbolts became the sign of the highest god's authority, each one a piece of fire shaped by fire. And for the goddess of wisdom and war, the forge god also made weapons worthy of her strength. Though she carried a shield and wore armor of her own, it was known that her weapons too were shaped in flame, not for show, but for power. They were sharp, balanced, and precise, made to suit the mind that wielded them, as thoughtful in their creation as the goddess was in her battles. So from scepters passed down through kings, to vines that never withered, from bronze noisemakers that drove back birds, to axes that turned men into omens, from arrows that slew monsters days after birth, to thunderbolts that lit the skies, and weapons fit for the wisdom of war. All these were made by the same hand, the hand that shaped the flame. And even if some questioned what was real and what was myth, the memory of these objects, shining in gold and bronze, hammered in silence and fury, still lived on as proof of the forge where gods received their gifts. Athene went to the divine smith because she needed weapons, strong and divine, forged not by mortal hands, but by the one who shaped fire itself. But the one she sought, having been left behind by the goddess of love, had fallen into loneliness and longing. When he saw Athene, his heart stirred in ways he could not control, and in that moment desire overcame his craft. As she turned away and moved with purpose, he followed, letting his emotions lead him rather than the calm control of the forge. She, unwilling and untouched by such desires, fled from him, running swiftly, her strength and purity guiding her away, as the forge master stumbled behind, drawn by a feeling he could not shape into gold or steel. In a different part of the world, the sons of that same firesmith bore weapons that carried his mark. One of them, Eurymedon, held in his right hand a spear, heavy and gleaming, shaped on his father's own anvil. Its point was sharp, its body balanced, and it carried within it the strength of flame and hammer. At his side, fastened near his thigh, hung a sword that caught the light with every movement. It was said that if a man lifted even a small stone and touched it lightly to the blade, sparks would leap from the metal as if the steel still remembered the forge where it was born. Another son held a bolt of fire, glowing and fierce, not for thunder, but for war. These weapons were not toys, but tools of power, crafted by hands that knew how to twist metal into strength, and they burned with the memory of their making. Among the gods themselves, armor was shaped by the fire god, and none was more feared than the Aegis, the terrible shield carried by the father of the sky and his warrior daughter. When the god of light walked ahead, wrapped in mist, he carried the Aegis with him, and it sent terror into the hearts of mortals. Its surface was shaggy, wild and terrible, a thing not polished but alive with force. It had been given by the smith of bronze to the king of gods, not as a gift of honor, but as a weapon of fear. And when it passed to the goddess of wisdom, it was reshaped in gold, not smooth, but scaled like a serpent, lined with coiling snakes. At its center, fixed upon her chest, was the severed head of the Gorgon, its eyes still rolling, its mouth forever open, frozen in that last terrible cry. The shield was forged not in silence, but in roaring flame, deep in the caverns of Lemnos, where the forge never slept and the hammer never paused. There, among the fire, the Aegis was born, a shield not only of defense, but of warning, its surface alive with magic and fear. The heroes of old too received weapons from the same forge. Perseus, the one who sought the head of the monster, carried with him a knife made not of bronze or iron, but of adamant, a metal that could not break. This knife was shaped by the fire god himself and was sharp enough to cut through the scales of the Gorgon. It gleamed with a cold light and never dulled, and when it struck, it did not hesitate. With it, Perseus ended the monster's gaze and carried her head away, not with strength, but with a blade forged in divine flame. At the wedding of a great hero, where gods gathered to celebrate the union of mortal and sea-born, many gifts were brought. One of them, a spear, was made from a strong ash tree, cut by a wise teacher and given to the groom. The spear was polished by the goddess of wisdom, its wood made smooth and straight. But it was the fire god who placed its head, shaping the point with care, making it sharp and strong. It was a weapon made by 3 hands, cut by knowledge, smoothed by thought, and tipped with flame. It would be carried into many battles and remembered in many tales. The same hero, it was said, also received a knife of great beauty. It was not only useful, but a thing of art, made by the one known across the heavens for his skill. The blade gleamed, and its edge held fast, and when it was raised in the hunt, it did not fail. In one painting, the hero stood with it in hand, facing a wild beast, calm and ready, trusting the knife given to him by the god of flame. Another tale told that, on a special occasion, perhaps even before his greatest trials, he had been given yet another blade, fine and sharp, shaped by the same hand, to serve him in all his needs. Whether in battle or in silence, the blade remained by his side, a quiet companion, a piece of fire made solid. So from the halls of Olympus to the wild fields of mortal men, the works of the fire god were seen everywhere. His forge did not only shape crowns and thrones, but knives, spears, swords, and shields. For gods, he made the Aegis and the thunderbolt. For goddesses, the sharp arrows and fearsome armor. For heroes, he made blades of adamant and spears of ash, giving them tools to face monsters, men, and fate itself. His skill was not only in the making, but in the knowing. He gave each creation not only form, but purpose. And though he limped, his hands never failed, and though he was left behind by love, his craft carried forward, glowing in every weapon that struck, in every shield that shone, in every story where fire became steel. His marriage to Thetis, Hephaestus gave a sword, a wedding gift shaped not of love but of war, forged by the fire that never slept. And from that act of divine craftsmanship, his work continued, spreading through the age of heroes like sparks from a flame. For Diomedes, the warrior known for breaking horses and breaking ranks, Hephaestus made a corselet that was no ordinary armor, but one wrought with long and hard toil, hammered and shaped not just with skill, but with the patience of fire itself. Each fold, each plate, each joint spoke of hours spent under the clang of bronze and the roar of bellows. And that armor became more than defense. It became a sign of the god's touch, worn into battle by one who would be remembered for strength and courage. Then came another time, another hero, and another mother's tears. Just as Thetis had once wept for her son, Eos, the goddess of dawn, shed tears for her child Memnon, and again the fire of the forge answered sorrow. Aeneas, in Virgil's tale, speaks of the weapons granted by gods, and calls upon Hephaestus not merely as a smith, but as one who listens to grief. The arms of Memnon were born from that same sorrow, made not only with fire but with sympathy, as if each stroke of the hammer answered a cry. And as these weapons moved from hand to hand, from hero to hero, the god's handiwork left traces across every battlefield. For Heracles, the greatest of all, the gifts were many and mighty. First came the greaves, shining bronze to guard his legs, not just metal, but divine protection, gifts of Hephaestus gleaming in the sunlight. Then the breastplate, golden and fine, shaped with care and mystery, a gift from Athena herself, prepared before Heracles began his harsh labors. The armor spoke of readiness, of journeys ahead where mortal strength would not be enough. He slung across his chest a quiver, hollow and hard, and filled it with arrows that were more than weapons. They were death itself in feathered form, long and sharp, soaked in metaphorical sorrow. These arrows, with smooth shafts and eagle feathers, seemed to cry silently, each tip whispering of lives it would end. With them he bore the steel that saves men from doom, strapped like fate across his back. Then he picked up his spear, a weapon not of chance but of choice, its head glinting with bright bronze, and placed on his head a helmet of adamant, fitted to his temples, carved with detail and locked tight like a second skull. That helm was not just protection, it was defiance, a way to face death and not flinch. And in his hands he held a shield, bright, terrible, unbreakable. A wonder to see, the shield shimmered with enamel, with ivory, with electrum, and above all, gold. Its face was alive with color and shape, bordered with blue kyanus that caught the eye like the sea at dusk. At the center of this grand circle was fear itself, Phobos, shaped in adamant, staring backward with fire-lit eyes, his mouth wide with perfect, terrifying teeth. Over this grim image hovered Strife, wild and merciless, her presence a warning to those who would oppose Heracles. She clouded the minds of men, sent reason fleeing, and left only madness behind. Those who fell to Heracles, their souls slipped beneath the world, passing into the house of the dead, their bones drying on the earth, turned to dust under the burning eye of Seirios. The shield did not stop with terror. It told stories in metal and light. There were images of pursuit and flight, of tumult and panic, of slaughter without end. There was strife again, moving fast, an uproar, a din turned to shape, and death fate, who held both the wounded and the unwounded, dragging them forward as if war chose its victims at random. The shield showed men clashing, shouting, falling, some struck already, others still waiting, all within the unrelenting storm of battle. Hephaestus had captured not just the look of war, but its heart, the confusion, the noise, the fear, the end. These were not decorations. They were reflections of what Heracles would face and what his enemies would see before they fell. Every part of the armor told a tale. Every piece was both a protection and a prophecy. The greaves, the breastplate, the quiver, the arrows, the spear, the helm, the shield. They were not simply tools of war. They were the god's reply to the world of men, his way of shaping fate through fire and metal. Each item had purpose, place, and power, and each came from hands that knew the weight of what they made. Through these gifts, Hephaestus was not just a crafter of objects. He was a shaper of moments, a silent participant in battles he would never see. His fire lit the stories of heroes, and his forge gave form to their legends. In the end, these creations stood not only on the battlefield, but in the memory of ages, shining, echoing, unbroken. Who was dead? She was dragging by the feet through the tumult of battle, through the chaos of war, where men cried and blades clashed and the ground shook with the weight of violence. Her grip was unyielding, her arms strong, and her motion unrelenting as she moved across the scene of blood and noise. Draped over her shoulders was a garment dyed in the dark red of spilled blood, not fresh but deep and soaked into the very threads of the fabric, as if the suffering of warriors had stained it forever. Her eyes blazed with terrible fury and madness, her teeth ground together in a snarl that spoke of rage, hate, and a thirst for destruction that had no end. From her head sprang the heads of snakes, not 1 or 2 but 12 in total, unspeakably horrible in their form and presence. These were not simple serpents, but creatures born of fear, wild and twisted, whose very image could bring nightmares. They had long been the terror of all mortals who dared raise arms against the mighty son of Zeus. For when he fought, they awakened, and their mouths clashed with noise like the rattle of death itself, their fangs grinding, their tongues flicking, and their heads swaying with menace. Their scales were not uniform but bore markings like spots, as though nature herself had painted them with care to warn all who looked. Their backs shimmered with a dark blue hue that seemed to ripple like the surface of a stormy sea, while their jaws, terrible and wide, were the color of deepest black, open to devour, to destroy, to silence. And they shone brightly, despite their horror, with a strange light that came from the wonder of their craftsmanship. Not just frightful, but beautiful, in the terrible way that only divine work can be. Elsewhere upon the shield, other images stirred into life, for there were droves of animals, fierce and furious, boars and lions locked in a moment of savage confrontation. Their eyes met with fire, their muscles tensed, and their bodies stood frozen in a breath before the charge. The lions bristled, their golden manes lifted as if caught in the wind of combat, and the boars grunted with sharp tusks, ready to slash. The two groups were marching towards one another, not with fear, but with fury, and in the space between them lay the proof of their struggle. Already a great lion had fallen, its breath gone, and beside it 2 boars also lay still, lifeless on the blood-soaked ground, their necks stretched out in the silence of death, while their dark blood flowed freely and seeped into the earth, staining the soil like ink on parchment. Yet even with these bodies lying dead between them, the beast did not retreat. Instead, their rage deepened, and the will to fight became even stronger. The air seemed to crackle with tension as they roared and charged, the wild boars and the glaring lions, each side unwilling to yield. Further along the shield was shown the fierce struggle of the Lapiths, the brave spearmen who had gathered together in unity to face the wild centaurs. Around their prince they stood Caeneus, Dryas, Pirithous, Hoplius, Exadios, Phalereus, Brolocus, Mopsos the son of the river god, a descendant of the war god himself, and the mighty Theseus, son of Aegeus, whose form stood tall and noble like one born of gods. Their bodies gleamed with silver, and they wore armor made of gold, crafted with care to show their strength and courage. Facing them was the untamed force of the centaurs, wild and bold, with Patraios, the seer Asbalos, Arctos, Aureus, black-haired Mimas, and 2 more of silver form. They were armed not with crafted spears alone, but held pine trees of gold, wielded like clubs, and they moved as though they lived, charging and striking, man against centaur, horse limb against human limb, hand to hand, spear against trunk, in a frozen moment that captured the storm of battle. In another space upon the shield, there stood the horses of war, swift and strong, the steeds of the battle god, made entirely of gold and full of motion. They reared and stamped, ready to ride into the fray, and upon their chariot stood their master, the god of war himself, shining with blood and standing tall, spear in hand. His eyes burned with the fire of slaughter, and his red hue glowed like the heat of a forge, as though he had just slain living men. Around him circled Deimos and Phobos, the embodiments of fear and panic, eager to dive into the ranks of soldiers and bring ruin. Standing near was the daughter of Zeus, the warrior goddess, helmeted and armed, a spear in her hand, and a breastplate over her chest. The aegis rested upon her shoulders, alive with energy, and she moved forward with determination, as though ready to command armies. She had the look of one preparing for battle, not with words, but with action, and her gaze was fixed upon the heart of the fighting. Elsewhere the divine were gathered, the holy ones who did not perish with time. In the middle of them, the god of music, son of Zeus and Leto, played on a golden lyre. His fingers danced across the strings and the sound floated like wind over water, gentle and pure, a contrast to the blood and dust below. Nearby stood the place of the gods, the shining heights of Olympus, clean and bright, where the immortals met. There in assembly they stood, with treasures vast and brilliant gathered all around. The Muses, the daughters of inspiration, began their song, their voices clear and lovely, rising into the air with words that carried the beauty of thought and sound. And on the edge of the shield, there was the image of a harbour, a calm space, a haven from the endless crashing sea. It was crafted with care and refinement, a peaceful place shaped against the wild force of the waters, a silent reminder that even in the world of war and gods, there could be rest. Tin, wrought in a circle, enclosed the harbour scene, and though the material was still and solid, it looked as if the surface of the sea itself was moving, shaped so skillfully that it seemed to rise and fall with living waves. The gentle curves and crests of the waves shimmered in the light, as if the tide were swelling, as if the shield itself breathed with the rhythm of the ocean. In the very center of this crafted sea were dolphins, many of them, not just placed in stillness, but made to look as if they were alive and in motion, darting this way and that in eager pursuit. They were hunting, leaping, twisting through the waters of tin, each captured mid-motion with flippers spread and tails flicking, the curves of their bodies bent in lifelike movement. Among them swam two larger dolphins, fashioned of silver, more radiant than the rest, shooting sprays of water as they surged forward with open jaws, catching silent fish in their mouths. The fish, made of bronze, trembled underneath them, their scales slightly raised, their bodies curved, their mouths parted as if caught mid-breath. The tension in their pose made them appear startled, aware of the hunt, helpless in the moment. At the edge of the sea scene along the shore sat a fisherman, still a sculpture but lifelike in form, crafted in careful detail. He was bent slightly forward, his eyes fixed on the water, his fingers wrapped around the net he held in his hands. The net looked ready to fly from his grip, wide and light, a hair's breadth from being thrown. It was a moment frozen, yet full of movement, a pause before action, drawn from the hands of a god who understood not only how men look, but how they wait. And above this quiet sea-bound scene was another image, one of flight and fear, of speed and power. There was the son of Danae, Perseus, who had horse's strength in his limbs but flew without touching ground. He hovered above the shield, his feet not quite on its surface, yet never fully detached, floating in a balance of weight and motion that defied understanding. He had been made of gold, and yet he looked alive. So precise and graceful was the hand that made him, the hand of the famous god who limped, who was gifted with fire and forge. The golden Perseus wore on his feet the winged sandals that carried him through the skies, light and fast, and across his shoulders ran a crossbelt of bronze from which hung his sword, sheathed in black, the weapon that would bring down monsters. He was not resting, but moving, stretched forward in flight, full of urgency, full of the kind of dread that lives just before danger. His back bore the head of the monster he had slain, the Gorgon, its terror hidden inside a silver bag, a container that shimmered and glowed with divine wonder. From the bag hung tassels, delicate but bright, made of gold and swaying as if they caught the wind of his motion. Upon his head was the helmet of Hades, the cap of darkness, a piece that did not gleam but swallowed light, a gloom like thick night, hiding him from sight. Perseus, fully formed and crafted, flew as if hunted, as if something behind him clawed through the air. And indeed, behind him surged the Gorgons, the sisters of the monster, fierce and relentless, their forms chasing after him with force. They could not be touched, nor named without dread, unapproachable in their rage, unspeakable in their wrath. Their feet, as they ran, struck the adamant surface of the shield, and it rang out, a sharp, echoing clang that resounded like metal upon metal, cold and piercing. Around their waists were girdles, and from these hung serpents, not limp but alive in their appearance, their heads bending forward, their tongues flicking like fire, their teeth bared and grinding in fury, their eyes staring forward with bright hate. The serpents did not rest but coiled and hissed, as though they too were part of the hunt. Above the Gorgons' terrifying faces quivered fear itself. Phobos, not just depicted, but shown as trembling, as if even fear feared the gaze of the Gorgons. And beyond this hunted scene lay a field of chaos, of men at war, battling in full armor. Some fought to protect their cities, their homes, their parents, while others pressed forward, burning with desire to destroy, to conquer, to take. Their swords clashed, their bodies twisted, their shields crashed together, and many had already fallen, their blood spilled, their lives gone. Yet more remained standing, struggling, fighting, driven by purpose or desperation. On tall towers of bronze stood women, calling out, their mouths open in silent cries, their hands clawing at their cheeks, their hair wild, shaped with such detail they seemed to breathe and scream. They were not living, but they looked as though they were, captured in the middle of their grief by the skilled hands of the divine smith. Below them, at the city gates, gathered the old men, the elders of the land, bent with age, their arms lifted in prayer. Their hands reached upward to the gods, pleading, full of fear for their sons and grandsons, helpless but hoping. And in the midst of the battlefield moved the Keres, the daughters of night, the spirits of death. They were dark and terrible, their eyes glowing red, their mouths full of sharp white fangs. They snarled and hissed, driven not by mercy but by hunger, fighting not against the men, but among themselves to claim the souls of the dying. They hovered above the fallen, waiting for the moment to strike, and when they saw a man drop, wounded or slain, one would leap forward with long claws and seize him, dragging his soul away into the deep gloom, to the land where no light lives, down to the icy pit of Tartaros. Once they had fed, once their hunger for blood and spirit was satisfied, they threw the empty body behind them no longer of use, and leapt again into the fray, looking for the next. Over these dark spirits loomed the three who rule fate itself. Clotho, who spins the thread, Lachesis, who measures it, and Atropos, the cutter, small in stature but unyielding. A goddess whose frame was not great, but whose power was absolute. She, though less tall, was no less terrible, for her hands held the shears that could end even the strongest life, and her choice could not be undone. Superior to the others and the eldest among them, she stood with an air of grim command, her presence more dreadful than the rest, and they, wild and bloodthirsty, fought with madness in their eyes over a single dying man, claws outstretched and hands swinging in rage, locked in a vicious struggle for his soul. Their faces twisted with fury, their gazes sharp like blades, they glared at one another, each desperate to claim him first. Around them the air was thick with the sound of growling and scraping, as they battled not with weapons but with their very limbs, their nails long and curved like talons, their arms flailing with brute strength. Close by stood the haunting shape of Archlis, the dark spirit of death sorrow, her figure terrifying in its misery. She was pale as bone and bent with the weight of eternal grief, her limbs frail, her knees grotesquely swollen, as if burdened with centuries of pain. Her fingers ended in long, ragged nails that hung like claws, and she drooled from her nose, her mouth half open in a grotesque leer. From her sunken cheeks, blood streamed slowly down, dripping in thick, dark drops to the dry earth below. Her shoulders were covered with dust, soaked with ancient tears, as if she had wept for all the dead since the dawn of time. Her face bore no peace, only a twisted smile of endless sadness, and her very shape seemed carved out of misery. Beside this grim scene came a change, and there appeared a bright and bustling city, strong with walls and towers that rose proudly into the sky. The gates, 7 in number, were made of gleaming gold, perfectly set into their frames, shining in the light as if they had never been touched by battle. Within the city all was joy and celebration. People danced in the streets, filling the air with song and music, the city alive with the sounds of pipes and laughter. A bridal procession was moving forward, a bride being brought on a polished chariot toward her new home, her veil fluttering like a soft cloud, the wheels of the cart turning smoothly on their path. Ahead of her walked maidens with torches, the flames casting golden waves into the night, and their faces lit with smiles. Behind them came groups of singing youths, their voices clear, soft-mouthed, as they moved in step with the high piping flutes, their melodies ringing out and echoing across the streets. The young women answered with dance, moving gracefully to the gentle strumming of lyres, their dresses flowing, their laughter rising like birdsong. On another side of the city, more young men celebrated, flutes guiding their steps as they danced, their bodies swaying, their feet stamping in time. Some laughed with joy, spinning, jumping, clapping, while others followed behind, playing music and tossing their heads in carefree rhythm. The city was overflowing with happiness, every corner filled with movement, every heart alive with celebration. Outside the walls, others were hard at work or testing their strength. Horsemen rode swiftly before the city, their cloaks flying behind them as they galloped across the plain. Farther out, farmers bent to their tasks, tilling the rich brown soil with tools in hand, their tunics bound tight for ease of motion, sweat glistening on their backs under the sun. Nearby spread a great field of golden grain, and reapers moved among the stalks with hooked blades, slicing the heavy heads of barley and wheat as they bent under the weight of the crop. Others gathered the cut grain into bundles, tying them with cords and stacking them high. They moved in rhythm, practiced and smooth, turning harvest into order. On the edge of the field, the threshing floor waited, smooth and wide, where more workers beat the grain and prepared it for storage. Not far away, others were tending vines, gathering the hanging fruit that clung in rows along trellises. The grapes were dark and heavy, clustered thick, and men picked them into baskets, white and black fruit separated, each shimmering beneath the silver tendrils. The vines themselves were no ordinary vines but cast in gold, a masterpiece shaped by the divine smith's hand. Their leaves trembled as if stirred by wind, their branches clung to stakes of silver, and the grapes upon them turned black as if ripening in the sun. Men crushed the gathered fruit beneath their feet, the red juice pouring out into waiting jars, while others dipped ladles to draw off the new wine. Elsewhere, men tested their strength not with tools but with fists. Wrestlers grappled on the ground, their limbs locked, their muscles tense, sweat flying with each struggle, each push and pull. Boxers circled one another, fists raised, their feet shifting carefully in the dust as they waited for the right moment to strike. The crowds watched closely, eyes following every move, every feint and lunge. Farther away, hunters gave chase, hares darting ahead through the fields, quick as shadows. Dogs, lean and sharp-eyed, bounded forward on tight leashes, snarling with excitement as they lunged at the fleeing prey, and the hares twisted and turned in panic, running for their lives, pursued with breathless urgency. And near all this, a race of speed and skill unfolded. Chariots rolled out onto the plain, their wheels gleaming, their drivers standing tall on woven platforms, reins loose but hands firm. The horses snorted, their hooves striking the earth, their manes flying as they surged forward. The race began and the chariots flew, the wheels spinning fast, the joints of the vehicles rattling as they bounded across the course. The axle boxes screamed, the sound of wood against wood rising into the air as the race became a blur of motion. Each driver pushed his team harder, each team strained for the lead, the dust rising thick behind them, the air vibrating with the thunder of hooves. But this was a race without end. Though they tried with all their might, no winner ever came. No chariot crossed the finish. No prize was claimed. The race went on without pause, without triumph or loss, a labor eternal. The end always just out of reach, the struggle without rest. And before them, as they circled and drove and fought to reach a place that would never arrive, the contest remained forever unwon. The great tripod of gold stood with a brilliance that caught the eye, a magnificent creation shaped by the clever hands of Hephaestus, the divine smith whose fingers had never known rest. Around the edges of this shining work, the vast river Okeanos flowed, wrapping the artwork in its eternal stream, giving the illusion that the very waters of the world had come to life and now moved in a circle, ever flowing, never still. Swans flew high above, their wings stretched wide, their cries echoing in the air as they glided gracefully through the sky. Others swam upon the surface of the imagined river, their white feathers brushing the golden currents, gliding alongside schools of fish that darted beneath the water's edge, silver tails flicking and vanishing into the depths. This scene alone made the shield a marvel, a thing so full of wonder and craft that even Zeus himself, the one who ruled the skies with thunder, would have been amazed by what he saw. It was by the will of Zeus that Hephaestus had shaped this strong shield, laying every piece with care, every symbol with thought, and finally fitting it together with his skilled hands. The shield, so mighty and full of detail, was held by the bold son of Zeus who lifted it with ease, its weight no burden to him, and stepped proudly into his chariot, ready for battle, the horses restless beneath him. Heracles, too, had been given great gifts before setting off on his heroic path. From Hermes came a sword, swift and sharp, while Apollo gave him a bow and a quiver of arrows that never missed their mark. Hephaestus, never failing in skill, forged for him a golden corselet, shining with the glow of divine fire. Athene added a woven peplos, her own hands having crafted it, soft yet strong. Among these treasures, the quiver stood out not only for its use in battle, but also for its beauty, covered in scenes that brought tales of old to life. On its belt were animals fierce and wild, bears that roared with silent rage, jackals whose lean bodies promised danger, and panthers with a sly expression in their shining eyes, as if they knew something cruel. Wolves with sharp fangs prowled across the leather, and boars with tusks ready to tear through anything. Lions stood proud, their manes flowing like fire, and every figure looked alive, though it was only metal shaped to trick the eye. But the quiver told more than stories of beasts. It held within its leather folds the memory of great myths. Hermes was there, swift-footed and silent, striking down Argos with a blow, the many-eyed giant finally falling asleep forever near the waters of Inachos. Phaethon, son of the sun, was shown tumbling from the sky in a storm of fire, the blazing chariot burning the earth below as he crashed into the river Eridanus. The sky itself was black with smoke, and the land beneath seemed to melt. Perseus was captured in the moment of his greatest triumph, blade raised as he took the head of Medusa, her snake hair frozen in place, near the edges of the world where night met day, where the ocean flowed from the end of the earth and the stars bathed in silence. Far off, the suffering of Prometheus was laid bare, the Titan hanging from the cold cliffs of the Caucasus Mountains, chains of unbreakable metal wrapped around him, while an eagle, sharp-beaked and merciless, tore at his liver again and again. His face, carved with such care, looked as though it truly felt pain, his mouth forever open in a soundless cry. These scenes, carved and shaped with care, were gifts from Hephaestus to Heracles, and when Heracles passed them on to Philoctetes, his closest and dearest friend, he gave with them the stories, the weight of the past, and the power of gods. Another hero, destined to rise even higher in glory, received his arms from the same divine craftsman. In the depths of his forge, Hephaestus turned toward his bellows, machines of fire and wind that moved only when he called. He gave them their command, and they answered, each one blowing fire from its mouth, feeding the crucibles with heat from all directions. They roared with wind, fanning the flames higher, hotter, stronger, as Hephaestus moved quickly from one spot to the next, his hands never resting, his mind always shaping. He tossed into the fire metals of strength and worth, bronze that could not wear down, tin that gleamed, gold that caught the light, and silver that sparkled like stars. Once the mixture was set, he placed his great anvil down on its stand, solid and unmoving, and grabbed his heavy hammer, its weight fitting perfectly in his hand. Each strike that followed was full of purpose. Sparks flew. The glow of the fire danced on his skin. He shaped the armor not only to protect but to tell a story, to show what the warrior who would wear it was meant to do. This armor, unlike any other, was made for Achilles, the son of the sea goddess and the mortal king. It was not just a gift, but a piece of destiny. Every part of it held a scene. Every layer spoke of strength, loss, hope, and fate. It was armor meant for a warrior who would stand at the center of a storm, one who would be the wrath of the battlefield itself. The shield he carried would not just block the strikes of enemies, it would reflect the world, show the heavens, tell the tales of gods and men alike. It was a mirror of the cosmos in gold and bronze, a masterpiece made not only with fire and metal, but with stories and memories. As the armor took shape under the hammer of Hephaestus, it became more than protection. It became the armor of a legend, the mark of a hero who would live and die by the sword, and be remembered in every breath of war, every song of grief, and every whisper of glory. In the other he grasped the pincers, strong and sure, ready for the shaping to come. Then he began the greatest work of all, the making of a shield, one that was vast and weighty, crafted not for simple defense, but as a world unto itself. He shaped it with care, laying each layer one upon the other, 5 in total, each one smooth and strong, held together by his unmatched hands. Around the edge he placed a shining triple rim, polished until it gleamed with light like the stars, and fitted a silver strap across its back so that it could be carried, heavy though it was, by the warrior meant to bear it. And then, upon the white surface of the shield, he began to carve and hammer and mold with divine skill, filling the space not with simple figures, but with the very patterns of the world. He placed the earth at its base, wide and solid, the foundation of all things, and above it the sky arched in a great curve, endless and blue, filled with shining wonders. The waters of the sea rolled beneath, vast and always moving, touching all lands. The sun, steady and bright, burned in golden fire across the top, and the moon swelled with her soft light as she grew toward fullness. In between, the sky was scattered with constellations, the same ones that mortals looked up to in the night, seeing in them their hopes and fears. There were the Pleiades, close together like sisters, and the Hyades with their rain-bringing gaze, and mighty Orion striding across the heavens with his belt of stars. The Bear also turned slowly, never setting, her eyes watching the north, circling and circling without rest. But it was not only the heavens that he placed upon the shield. He shaped the lives of people too, showing their joys and struggles in the space of bronze. 2 cities he made, full of life. In one, there was peace. Weddings filled the streets, and songs rose through the air. Brides, dressed in fine clothes, were led by torchlight from their chambers, their faces glowing with joy. Music filled the air, the sounds of flutes and lyres lifting up as young men danced in circles, their steps quick and light. Women watched from doorways, their eyes full of pride and wonder. In the center of the city, the marketplace was crowded. A quarrel had broken out, and the crowd had gathered around 2 men. One demanded the price of blood for a slain man, while the other offered full payment in front of all. The matter had not yet been settled, and so they turned to judges, elders sitting on polished stone benches within a sacred circle. Each elder held a staff, the mark of their place, and listened carefully as the 2 men argued. Voices rose from the crowd as some supported one man and some the other. On the ground between them lay 2 bars of gold, shining even in the shadow, meant for the elder who could speak the truest judgment. In the second city there was no peace, only the tense breath before battle. 2 armies lay outside its walls, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. Inside the city, the people argued. Some wished to fight and take everything. Others wanted to split the riches and walk away. But those inside would not surrender. The young men of the city went out, ready to meet their fate, while the old stood on the walls with the women and children, holding fast to what was theirs. Leading them into the fight were Ares and Athene, gods of war and wisdom. They were not ordinary figures, but towering and bright, cast in gold and dressed in golden armor, their shapes so large and shining that they stood above all others, easily seen from far away. Around them, the mortal soldiers looked small. These warriors went to the place of ambush, a quiet river where animals came to drink, and there they hid, crouching in their bronze armor, waiting in silence, their breath held, their weapons gripped tight. But apart from these, were sitting two men to watch for the rest of them, and waiting until they could see the sheep and the shambling cattle, and the moment did not take long to come. Soon the animals appeared over the low hills and through the grass, moving slowly and without worry, the sheep shining in the sunlight with their wool, and the cattle large and steady in their pace, their heads low as they walked. Two herdsmen followed them, relaxed and calm, their pipes playing light music that floated gently in the air, and they walked with no fear, unaware of the danger waiting in silence. The two watchers, seeing the moment arrive, gave the signal, and from the hidden places their companions rushed out, fast and without a sound. They split around the animals, surrounding them from both sides, and quickly drove off the herds of cattle and the beautiful sheep, gathering them in with practiced speed. The two herdsmen, caught in surprise and confusion, were struck down where they stood, their songs silenced in an instant. But the other army, not far away, heard the noise and cries that rose from the attack. They were sitting in council, planning their next move, but as soon as the sound reached their ears, they stood and mounted their fast horses, not wasting a moment, and rode out swiftly to chase the raiders. They caught up with them by the riverbank, where the ground was soft and the trees thin, and there the two sides clashed. They fought hard, man against man, spear against spear, the bronze tips flashing in the sun as they struck forward and back. Among them moved the figures of doom. Hate, always close in battle, stirred the fight with her dark will, and confusion mixed the fighters, so none could tell friend from foe. Death, fierce and sure, walked between them, dragging a corpse by the feet, blood flowing in her wake. She held one man just wounded and gasping, another untouched but terrified, and one already cold in her grasp. Her cloak was soaked deep red with blood, heavy with the loss of men. All the fighters closed in, pressing close as if truly alive, not images on a shield, but real warriors, struggling and falling, taking and giving wounds and pulling back the bodies of the dead, each side refusing to let go, battling even over the fallen. Then he made on the shield a field of soft, rich land, a farmer's pride, golden and wide, broken into 3 long sections as if freshly ploughed. Many men moved upon it, driving their teams of oxen with steady rhythm, turning their ploughs at the end of each row. As the teams reached the end strip of the field, where one furrow met the next, a man met them there with a flask, handing out sweet wine to the ploughmen to refresh them. They drank and turned again to their work without pause, eager to continue. The ground behind them darkened as the ploughs cut deep, turning over the earth in long, neat lines. But this field was not made of soil. It was gold, yet it looked so much like real ploughed earth that it seemed as if life had taken root even in the metal. It was another marvel on the shield, showing the strength of toil and the beauty of the land worked by human hands. Then he shaped the lands of harvest, the estate of a king, where reapers moved through tall grain with sharp hooks, their hands fast and sure. The stalks fell in lines as they cut, falling forward, ready to be tied. Behind the reapers, 3 men stood binding the sheaves, wrapping the golden stalks with ropes to hold them tight. And farther behind them, children ran with quick steps, lifting the fallen stalks and gathering them in their arms, always bringing more, always moving. It was a scene of order and life. Near them stood the king, silent, watching with his staff in hand, smiling gently at the work of his people. Not far from the field, under the shade of a wide tree, heralds prepared a meal. They had taken a great ox and dressed it, and now they cut the meat and arranged the feast. The women scattered handfuls of white barley for the workers to eat, a simple gift for their labor, and the whole scene glowed with peace and satisfaction, shaped perfectly into the surface of the shield. He did not stop there. He made upon it a vineyard full of ripe beauty, its branches heavy with grape clusters. The vines were made of gold and hung thick with fruit dark in color, made to look rich and full. The grapes clung to silver poles, and the vines wrapped around them, climbing up and curling gently. Around this vineyard, he carved a ditch of deep dark metal, giving it depth and edge, and outside this, he placed a fence of tin, soft in color but clear in shape. The vineyard, though crafted from metal, seemed alive with harvest, each part placed to show growth and the care of those who made it. It stood as a vision of abundance, locked in gold, silver, and tin, captured on the shield that was becoming not just a weapon, but a world in its own right. Only one path to the vineyard, narrow and winding, laid out as if nature itself had shaped it for the harvest, and along this single trail the grape bearers moved, joyful and light in their steps. They were young girls and young boys, full of life and laughter, their arms steady as they carried baskets made of reeds, brimming with heavy clusters of ripe grapes, the kind of fruit that glowed in color and gave off the scent of sweetness in the air. They moved as one, not only with purpose but with delight, and in the midst of them walked a youth with a lyre in his hands, his fingers gently plucking its strings. The sound of music floated across the air, soft and beautiful, as he sang a clear song in memory of Linos, the ancient tune rising and falling with a rhythm that wrapped around the harvesters. Their feet moved in time with the melody, dancing in soft skips and graceful twirls, and their voices joined in whistles and cheerful hums. The music was their guide, and the vineyard, though made of gold and precious metals, seemed alive with the joy of harvest, a place not only of work but of celebration and lightness. The figures, though crafted from unbending material, appeared as if they would move again, dancing forever in the joy of the song. And beside this, the master of the forge shaped a herd of horned oxen, each animal full of energy and strength, their horns straight and proud. The bodies of the cattle were made from gold and tin, their forms full and solid, yet their motion showed speed and restlessness. They surged out of the farmyard's shadow, their hooves striking the ground in rhythm, lowing as they headed for the open land, where a river gave sound to the breeze, and where reeds moved gently beside the flowing water. The herd moved as one body, the air thick with the sound of their calls, and alongside them walked the herdsmen, shaped of gold, 4 in number, watchful and calm. Behind them followed 9 dogs, quick and alert, their paws caught mid-stride, ready for the sudden turn or chase. But ahead of the herd, trouble had come. 2 lions, mighty and fierce, had seized a strong bull, their teeth deep in his side, and the bull cried out with loud lowing, his voice echoing across the open field as he was dragged away. The herdsmen shouted and the dogs rushed forward, driven by instinct and the call of their masters. But the lions held their ground, ripping into the thick hide, the blood dark as it spilled across the ground, their mouths tearing at the flesh, drinking deeply and devouring the insides. The dogs lunged and snapped, but pulled back just before making contact, their courage faltering in the face of such savage power, Still, they circled, barking loud, showing their teeth, refusing to leave, but never quite daring to attack. The young men raised their hands, calling the dogs on, but still the lion stood over the kill, untouchable. Not far from this scene of wildness, the smith of great strength and patient skill shaped a quiet valley. It was a wide meadow, peaceful and gentle, green though made of gold, resting in the curve of hills. Here, flocks of sheep glimmered in the golden light, their bodies soft and full, gathered together as they grazed. Around them were dwellings, small and neat, with roofs shaped to protect, and shelters built for night or storm. Folded gates stood nearby, marking the edges of the space, keeping the animals safe and close. The place seemed to hum with calm, the life of tending and care, of order and quiet watching. Each sheep stood carefully placed, but with an air of peace, as if the scene had captured a single perfect day in the life of the shepherds. And then, in the middle of the shield's broad face, he made a dancing floor shaped in a circle, balanced and smooth, crafted to mirror the one once built in the wide courts of Knossos, where Daedalus had made it for the girl with shining hair. Upon this floor, young men and maidens moved in harmony, each step light, each turn graceful. They were joined at the wrists, dancing in pairs, spinning and weaving, their clothes flowing with each step. The girls wore long robes, light in color, moving like wind around their ankles, and on their heads were garlands shaped with delicate care. The boys wore short tunics, smooth and shining, their cloth fine and pressed, touched with oil to catch the light. At their sides swung golden knives, hanging from belts of silver, flashing as they moved. Sometimes the dancers stepped quickly, their feet barely touching the floor, light as potters testing the span of a wheel, pressing and shifting. At other times, they broke into rows, weaving between each other, two lines crossing and recrossing in smooth turns. Around the dance, many people stood watching. A great crowd gathered, their faces lit with happiness, enjoying the rhythm and form. And in the middle of the dancers, two acrobats moved, spinning and flipping, guiding the music and the dance, their bodies turning as they led the motion of the circle, keeping the rhythm alive. And on the very edge, at the outermost rim of the shield, he shaped the deep and endless strength of the great river, Okeanos, the water that circled the world. It flowed in a perfect ring, surrounding all the scenes within, the cities, the fields, the battles, and the dances. The river was the last touch, a reminder of the limit, the boundary that held the world together, the flow that never stopped, always circling, always enclosing all things. And when this great work, the shield of countless images, was finished, when the world had been laid in gold and bronze and tin and silver, shaped by hands that never tired, then he turned at last to the armor itself, to the corselet, the helm, and the greaves. These too he shaped with care, each piece solid and shining, each one built for strength and for glory. He gave them the same life, the same weight of skill, and the same purpose. And so, the shield, vast and filled with all the parts of mortal life and divine breath, was at last complete. Heavy, he wrought for him a corselet brighter than fire in its shining, a chest piece that seemed to hold the glow of the sun itself, its surface so polished and bright that it almost burned the eyes to look at it, gleaming with the brilliance of something beyond mortal reach. And he shaped it to wrap perfectly around the chest, fitting close and strong, made with care in every line and curve, a protection not only of the body, but of the soul. He then fashioned a helmet, solid and heavy, made to cover the head in full, resting tight against the temples. built with intricate designs that twisted and turned like waves of metal, and he placed a ridge of pure gold across its top, shining and bold, a mark of nobility and divine craft. And for the legs, he shaped armor out of pliable tin, hammered and molded to bend with motion, but never lose its strength. The greaves that would guard the lower limbs, light but unyielding, shaped with just as much care as the grander pieces. When the work was done, the forge fell silent, and the master of fire, known for his strength and tireless hands, took up the armor he had made and placed it before the sea-born mother, the one who had come seeking help for her son. She stood still as he gave it to her, and in an instant she rose again like a hawk, swift and certain, flying down from the high cold peaks of Olympus, her wings not seen but her speed unmatched, and she carried with her the shining armor, the gift of divine craft, ready to be given to the one who needed it most. As she descended, the sun had not yet risen, but now the dawn, dressed in robes the color of gold, stepped out from the river Okeanos, bringing with her the light that would soon touch the eyes of gods and men alike. And the mother of the great warrior came to the ships, her steps quiet, her arms still holding the radiant work of the forge. She found her son lying in grief, his arms wrapped around the fallen one he loved, and his cries filled the air, sharp and full of sorrow. She touched his hand gently and called him by name, her voice soft but strong, and told him to accept from her the glorious armor made by hands no mortal could match, armor that no man had ever worn, not before and not again, a gift so splendid it was worthy only of a son, born of both sea and greatness. She spoke these words and placed the armor down before him, and the sound of the pieces touching the earth rang out clear and loud, a clang of power and beauty. The warriors standing around were shaken. A deep fear came over them, and they dared not look directly at the armor. Its light and power were too great. It was not fear of pain, but of awe, of the presence of something made by gods and not meant for ordinary men. Only the warrior for whom it was made could look upon it without turning away. He gazed at the armor, and as his eyes moved over each part, his rage grew brighter inside him. His grief did not fade, but it sharpened, and the fire of vengeance rose stronger. His eyes, hidden beneath his lids, shone like the flare of the sun, fierce and blinding. He was glad, truly glad, holding in his hands the shining armor, the work of the divine forge. And when he had looked enough, when his heart had taken in the sight of the corslet, the greaves, the helm, and the shield, all made with the detail of eternity, he spoke to his mother, saying these were not the works of men, but of gods, that no mortal hand could have crafted what now lay before him. And he said that now the time had come, that he would put the armor on and step forward again into the war. And so, in his anger, full of purpose and fire, he began to arm himself. First, he picked up the greaves, those fair and shining guards, and fastened them around his legs with silver clasps that held tight to his ankles. Then he wrapped the corslet around his chest, the piece that gleamed like fire, and it fit him as if it had grown there, part of him, not worn, but fused with his form. He slung his sword next across his back, bronze in its body, the nails that held its grip made of shining silver, and it hung with weight and balance. Then he lifted the shield, vast and heavy, the same one shaped with scenes of the world, and the light from it poured upward into the sky, glowing like the moon in the night, not flickering but steady and powerful. The light from that shield was so great it seemed to touch the heavens, and all who saw it knew that the one who held it was no longer the same man. Then he picked up the helmet and set it down upon his head. It was heavy, but he wore it as if it were nothing, the horsehair crest above it waving slightly, and the golden threads that the smith had placed around its edges shook like stars in the light. They did not move with wind, but with power, each strand a thread of fire and craft. And when all the pieces were in place, he moved, and the armor moved with him. He tested its weight and balance, and it did not slow him. It lifted him instead. The armor did not pull him to the ground. It gave him wings, not of feathers, but of force, and it carried his limbs with grace. He became more than a man. He was the flame of battle made flesh. And as he stood, wrapped in the armor that no mortal had ever worn, the light from him cast long shadows, and all those around him stepped back, not from fear, but from reverence. He did not speak, for his will was already clear, and the armor, shaped in silence and mires, said everything for him. Of the people, there was none who could fully grasp the greatness of what had been made, but it stood before them in all its glory, a thing beyond the reach of time. On the terrible and grim shield, shining with its divine beauty and forged by a god's tireless hands, a great spear was driven by a warrior in battle. The heavy pike struck with such force that the shield itself moaned, as though it had a voice, groaning under the weight of the attack. The one who held it, strong in arm and burning with purpose, braced himself against the strike, holding the shield with his powerful hand and pushing it away from his chest, shaken for a moment. For he had thought that the long-shadowed spear, thrown by a brave and skilled warrior, would go through the shield and find its mark. But he did not know, and his heart did not understand, that the gifts shaped by the gods do not break under the hands of mortals. No matter how strong or wise the fighter, such gifts stand firm. The heavy spear, thrown with skill and strength, could not pierce the shield completely. It broke through 2 layers, driving deep, but could go no further, because the god who shaped the shield had made 5 layers in total, placing gold between them, and it was in this gold that the ash wood spear finally stopped, caught, and held fast. The shield remained whole, glowing with light and power, and the hand that held it remained firm. The shield's wide face, so carefully made, continued to protect, the scenes carved into it still unbroken, the images still moving across its surface as if alive. In another moment, the warrior stood tall, and the shield, massive and covered in detailed scenes, lay flat against his chest, protecting his heart and soul. Upon his head, he wore a helmet so bright and intricate it caught every light. It had 4 horns and shimmered with golden threads woven into the structure by divine hands. As he nodded, the golden fringes shook around it, alive with the memory of the forge that shaped them. This armor was not of mortal making. It was bright and untouchable, built by a god who had given it every mark of his craft. The helmet fit like a second skin, firm against the skull, balanced so perfectly that its weight became nothing to the one who wore it. And among the many who saw it, there were those who would remember how the armor had first come to be, how the one who shaped it had done so with hands that dragged as he moved, not strong in steps, but mighty in work. Behind him, a helper followed, carrying fire tongs, the tools of the forge, and even in this act, the divine fireworker never paused, always building, always shaping. And of all his works, the dance was remembered, the one he carved onto the shield's surface, a dance so full of life and motion that it was said to match the wonder of an ancient design made by another master in the halls of a wide palace. The scenes on the shield turned with light steps, and no eye could look upon them without awe, for they were carved so skillfully that they seemed to move and breathe. There was a boy there too, a harpist, singing softly a sad and ancient song, the song of Linos, a tune older than war, older than grief, and known across the land. It was carved into the metal, and yet those who saw it could almost hear it. So perfect was the shape of the mouth and the movement of the hands upon the strings. The shield, though made of bronze and gold and tin, seemed to hum with music. And much later, after the battles were done, after the fire and the dust, the shield was placed once more where all could see it, at the funeral games held in honor of the warrior who had worn it. The Divine Mother laid down the armor in the center of the gathering, a sign of what had been and what had been lost. The shield still caught the light, and the delicate details made by the forge worker still sparkled under the sun. Its surface was covered in intricate scenes that Hephaistos had shaped with effort and care, every part filled with life and meaning. The sun glinted off the polished edges, and the onlookers could not help but marvel. There were no words for such a thing. The armor did not need praise, it spoke for itself. On that shining surface, shaped by a god, the topmost image showed high heaven, the wide expanse of sky, and above it floated the soft shifting of clouds. Below was the land, steady and green, and beside it the deep blue of the sea, each wave carved in perfect curves. The winds flew across the air, and there were the rolling shapes of the clouds again, moving as if alive. The moon glowed from one side, and across from her was the sun, each in its rightful place, watching over the world. The stars too were there, every one in its orbit, fixed in the heavens, turning slowly in their eternal path, forming the signs and figures men had always looked to for meaning. They were not only set into the bronze, but made to seem distant and eternal, part of a world larger than men could know. And above it all, rising and stretching, was the air itself, vast, endless, filled with motion. Birds with thin beaks flew through it, their wings open wide, light upon the breeze. They seemed to float, caught mid-flight, and those who looked might believe they truly lived, that they would flap their wings again and rise further into the sky. Around them, the figures of the great river and the mother of the sea held the border of the world. Tethys, with her arms open wide, embraced the sky and the sea alike, and Okeanos, the river that flowed without end, surrounded everything, circling the edge of the shield in a perfect ring. His current had no end and no beginning, always moving, the boundary of all that was shaped upon the bronze. The shield was not simply protection, it was the world itself, held in the hand of a single man, a gift from a god born not just of metal, but of light, of time, of song, and of memory. Outrushing flood of rivers crying to the echoing hills all round, to right, to left, rolled o'er the land, wild and furious, their waters crashing against stone and tree, tearing the soil and roaring as if the earth itself groaned beneath them. The sound rang through the valleys and up into the crags, echoing across the ridges that rose like walls, enclosing the scene in steep league-long mountain ranges. These towering peaks were not empty but alive with untamed life, for they were the haunts of creatures fierce and cruel. Terrible lions lurked in the shadows, their eyes burning, their breath silent as they waited to strike. Foul jackals crept through the undergrowth, snarling low as they picked through the scent of blood and prey. There were fierce bears that moved slowly but with unstoppable power, and sleek panthers with silent steps and deadly speed. All prowled through the broken lands where danger was constant. Among them moved wild boars, their tusks long and sharp, grinding together in fury, their mouths frothing as they prepared to charge with terrifying strength. Into this wild, Men came with their hounds, hunters driving through the brush, chasing the beast with loud cries and sharp commands. The beaters ran ahead, throwing stones and darts, stirring the animals from hiding places. The scene carved so vividly it seemed to pulse with life, the very breath of the hunt captured in unmoving bronze. And not far from this chaos of nature was the chaos of men, for there on the shield also were the horrors of war. Man-devouring battles raged across the surface. Warriors fell, trampled beneath galloping horses, their limbs twisted in the dust, blood rising in waves as blades cut through flesh. The ground looked soaked in red, the plain blood-drenched as if it had drunk from the fallen and remembered the taste. Panic ran wild there, and Dread stood tall, her face twisted, her hands red with battle. There was ghastly Enyo, her limbs dripping blood, her steps never still, always moving through carnage. Deadly strife clashed beside her, ever stirring men to destroy one another, and the avenging spirits, hearts full of fire, goaded the fighters on with flaming breath, their voices screaming for more blood, more death. Around them circled the fates, silent but always near, waiting for each life to end, unblinking. And beside them marched battle itself, not as a figure imagined, but shaped in form, solid and screaming, its limbs pouring sweat and blood, moving always forward, never tiring, never sated. The Gorgons, too, were there, with faces no man could look upon, their hair a writhing mass of serpents, tongues flicking, eyes wide and cold, turning the strongest hearts to stone. Every detail was shaped so carefully, so perfectly, that those who saw it believed the figures could rise, could move, could leap from the bronze and continue the war they depicted. And while all these terrors of war filled one part of the shield, in another there was peace, a complete contrast, a calm world full of life and order. Countless tribes of men lived in wide cities, and their lives were watched over by Justice herself, standing firm, ensuring fairness among all. The people went about their labors, each hand set to a different task. Fields stretched far and wide, heavy with crops, the earth giving generously. The harvest was in full motion. Reapers moved in lines, swinging sharp sickles, cutting clean swaths through golden grain, the sound of steel against stalk rhythmic and sure. Behind them came the sheaf binders, quick and practiced, tying the bundles tight and lifting them into wains drawn by yoked oxen. The carts groaned with the weight of grain, and further on, other oxen pulled ploughs through black soil, breaking the land for another planting. Youths ran alongside with long goads, guiding the beasts, their voices loud and sharp. It was a scene of endless motion, of toil and reward, and every muscle, every tool, every movement was shaped into the bronze with care, as if the entire world had been captured in a moment. High above it all rose the sacred Mount of Honor, steep and difficult to climb. Its sides were broken by sharp rocks, its paths twisted and harsh. Upon a tall palm at its peak, Honor sat, her bare hands reaching toward the sky. She did not look down, but ever up, and around her the broken tracks turned away many who tried. Some climbed, struggled, and slipped back down, defeated. Only a few, those willing to endure, made it to her feet, soaked in sweat, their bodies marked by the climb. It was a mountain not of stone alone, but of spirit, and its image on the shield stood taller than all others, for it was the most difficult to reach. And then the shield turned again, showing scenes of joy. A great banquet was spread, and music filled the air. The pipe whistled sweetly, the harp hummed in harmony, and dancers moved with light feet. Maidens with flowing robes spun in slow circles, their faces smiling, their steps full of grace. Boys followed in quick turns, their feet flashing across the floor, every leap and spin shaped into the metal as if the rhythm lived within it. The dance was full of beauty, full of soul, and beside it rose another wonder, as from the sea came the goddess of love, crowned with foam, her hair wet with salt, her eyes gleaming. Desire hovered near, his smile soft and mischievous, and the Graces danced with her, their hair streaming behind them, their bodies light as wind. The daughters of the sea god led her up from the waves, guiding her to meet her warrior bridegroom, and all around on the long slopes of the mountain, the gods gathered to feast, their forms carved with elegance and joy. The meadows around them bloomed endlessly. Dew clung to every blade of grass. Flowers of all kinds starred the land in colour. Groves stretched with their cool shade, and springs bubbled clear, each one cut into the shield with such detail that the water seemed to move. In the far corners of the shield, ships moved across the sea. Their sails pulled tight with wind, the waves curled around them, and the sound of the ocean seemed to rise from the metal. Some ships were climbing against the wind, beating hard, their sails groaning, their prows lifting and falling. Others raced with the breeze, gliding fast over the blue, their speed caught mid-motion, sails stretched, hulls leaning. And so the shield, though made of bronze, breathed with every image. It held the wild, the war, the peace, the climb, the joy, and the love. It was the world, captured not in ink or voice, but in shape and shine, locked in metal, but alive in every line. It was not just armor. It was the memory of all things that live and strive and fall, and it gleamed beneath the sun, eternal. To windward, some that sped before a following wind, and round them heaved the melancholy surge, swelling and sinking as if the sea itself sighed beneath the weight of the sky. The ships carved through the waves, some struggling against the breath of the wind, others riding swift before it, sails full and straining, the white cloth catching the light like wings in motion. Around them the sea groaned and hissed, its dark water turning silver where the waves broke and foamed. On the decks of those ships, seared and sun-darkened men rushed back and forth, their voices rising in urgency, their hands working fast, pulling ropes, hauling sails, shouting commands over the wind's howl. Some rowed, their oars dipping into the water with quick, desperate strokes, blades flashing as they rose and fell. The sea churned along the hulls, hoary with foam, the splash of oars falling in perfect rhythm, cutting through the dark waters like a song of labour and struggle. And above this scene of motion and danger, there rode the Earthshaker himself, seated in triumph upon the backs of monstrous sea creatures with feet that churned the ocean into spray. They drew him swiftly across the waves, each strike of their limbs parting the water, and he stood tall upon his chariot, smiting them with a whip of gold. They surged forward faster than the wind, and wherever they passed, the sea smoothed itself into calm, the waters falling flat as polished stone beneath their trail. On either side of him, dolphins leapt from the waves, silver-bodied, their backs arched in homage, dancing in wild joy, their sleek forms frozen in motion though shaped from unyielding metal. They moved like living things, darting over the haze-draped sea, their shapes perfect in every curve. All this wonder was shaped by the hands of one who never tired, the master of fire whose soul burned with craft beyond time. Every detail, from wave to whip, from sail to snout, was carved into the great shield, and around all these wonders ran the edge, a border made of the endless river Okeanos, circling like a garland of water, his fathomless flood clasping the outer rim in a perfect curve. the final seal to the many wonders contained within the strong shield's wide face. And there, beside the shield, lay the helmet, massive and unyielding, shaped to cover the head and guard the mind. Upon its crest stood Zeus himself in the fury of battle, throned high upon the dome of heaven, his face fierce, his hand raised. All around him the immortals clashed in war, their forms locked in combat with the ancient ones who dared rise against them. The Titans and Gigantes, huge and terrible, were already caught in the burning, their bodies wrapped in fire, their limbs flailing as bolts fell from the sky. The thunder came not in one strike, but many, thick and fast like the snow that falls in winter storms, pouring down from the heavens, each bolt a scream of light. Zeus was roused to his full strength, and those who stood against him were scorched and shattered, their bodies giving off the heat of their defeat. The very metal of the helmet seemed to breathe this storm, every curve of the crest alive with the fury of the old war, the struggle of gods against giants, a battle sealed into bronze. Beside the helmet lay the corselet, fair and strong, a work no blade could pierce. It had once encircled the chest of a warrior without equal, fitting him alone, too vast and heavy for any other. Its surface was smooth, but every inch held power, forged with purpose and strength, molded by hands that understood how to shape not only metal but fate itself. Nearby were the greaves, tightly fitting the legs, vast in size, curved to shield the flesh and bone, yet light to the one they were made for, as if his very stride had been measured in the making. They were heavy to any other, but to him they were part of his form, the shape of his motion and the force of his step. And hard by, there lay the sword, the edge glinting with a light like fire. Its point was a needle of death, so sharp that no armor, no shield, no flesh could stop it. It was sheathed in silver, resting within a scabbard bright and smooth, and the belt that held it was gold, shining around a hilt of pale ivory. Of all the weapons in that place, this blade shone the brightest, its light casting lines across the ground, a sword that had tasted war and would taste it again. And nearby on the earth, stretched long and quiet, lay the dread spear. It was as tall as the towering trees that grew on the slopes of Pelion, and even as it rested, the dark stain of battle clung to it. It breathed still the reek of blood, not just of any enemy, but of the one who had fallen by its point. Its shaft, still red where the blow had landed, remembered the last strike it had given, and the earth beneath it seemed marked by that final breath. Then, in the midst of the warriors, the one robed in black, the mother of the fallen, stood. Her sorrow ran deep, but her voice rose strong. She spoke not of her grief, for that was known to all, but of the prize she had set forth for the games, now ended. She called upon the greatest among the warriors, not by name but by deed, the one who had brought back the body of her child. To him she offered the arms, the shield, the sword, the armor made by gods, the arms that even the deathless themselves had paused to gaze upon. At her call, two champions stood, one clever and steadfast, the other mighty and unshaken. They both claimed the right. They both believed themselves worthy. The words that followed rang through the camp, sharp and full of pride. In the end, the chieftains gave judgment, and the arms were passed to the one chosen by fate and counsel. Later, the armor came again into the light when the fallen warrior's son, young and full of fire, was called to war, and the one who had earned the arms stepped forward and offered them, saying they were more than any mortal gear. They were like the armor of the god of war himself. Their surface gleamed with gold, and the images upon them burned with the life of battle and the light of craft. And even in heaven, where nothing surprises, the God who had shaped them smiled again at his own work, for nothing like it had ever been made, and nothing ever would be again. It was not just armor. It was a world made of bronze, gold, and memory, a gift shaped by flame, a legacy bound in metal, glowing still beneath the gaze of time. In fashioning that work divine, the which thine eyes shall marvel to behold, there was nothing spared by the hands that shaped it, for the shield stood as a wonder beyond the reach of mortals, and within its round frame was carved the full circle of the world, its rim shining with divine light, its face filled with the visions of earth, sea, and sky. The land lay wide with cities and fields, where people lived in peace and in strife, tilling the ground, dancing in joy, battling in war. Each figure caught in motion though shaped from metal, each one alive in its silence. The seas rolled across the lower portion of the shield, full of ships with swelling sails, some beating against the wind, some gliding easily with it, and among them the waves danced and broke, frothing with energy that felt as though it would spill off the shield and into the air. The sky stretched above, a broad arc over all, glowing with the fire of the sun and the silver of the moon, both set in place to shine eternally, neither waning nor fading, caught at their brightest. And among the sky's curved edge were set the stars, not just dots of light, but true constellations, made with care and knowledge, each one placed in its rightful home. There were the Pleiades, small and clustered, rising in spring and vanishing in fall, used by men to know the time for sowing seed or reaping grain. Near them stood the Hyades, their shape marked with a soft rain-bearing curve, and Orion, strong and broad-shouldered, his star sword hanging at his side. Around him turned the Bear, circling endlessly, its 7 stars fixed but never falling, always turning around itself and never sinking into the river that enclosed the world. All these were set in their proper place, their order true, their meaning clear to those who watch the sky. And below them, the earth spread out, not just mountains and rivers, but scenes of life, men and women dancing, ploughing, reaping, sailing, hunting, feasting, each scene shaped with a hand that knew not only the form of bodies, but the movement of souls. It was a wonder, even to the immortals, for never had such detail, such brilliance, such a complete mirror of the world been cast into bronze before. No man had ever worn such armor, none save the warrior it was first made for, the one honored by all as equal to a god, whose name stirred fear and awe even in death. Among all who followed the banners of war, there was one who loved him most deeply, who stood beside him and brought his body back from the fire and blood. It was to this man that the Divine Mother gave the arms, these sacred gifts, shining and unmatched. Though he valued them, though they had been earned through grief and flame, he gave them in turn, willingly and without bitterness, to the son who now rose to claim his place. In his father's arms the son was clad, and lo, he seemed his father reborn. The armor wrapped close around him, not stiff or heavy, but light upon his limbs, folding to his form, as if it had been made for him from the start. Such was the skill of the Maker, that even though the armor had once been worn by one greater than all others, it did not weigh down the shoulders of the youth, but embraced him, matched him, welcomed him. The helmet, massive and crowned with horsehair, did not press down his brow, but rested easily, and the great spear, long as the tall pines from which it came, was lifted by his hand, as if it weighed no more than a rod of reed. That spear still drank the blood of the fallen, and the edge of its head glinted with memory and purpose. Though tall and heavy, it did not burden the arm that now held it. Instead, it moved in swift circles, hungering for battle once more. Elsewhere, a painting captured this moment for eternity, and in it the youth wore the armor made by the fire-handed god, the same armor once claimed in sorrow and now passed on in honor. The one who had first worn it was gone, but the story remained, and the shapes upon the armor had not faded. The shield still bore all the wonders first placed there. The sea was not just a flat space of silver, but rolled in soft color, each wave cut with blue and green, a surface filled with depth and light. The land showed its cities, its fields, its trees, and the sky above still glowed with gold and pearl, the sun and moon full and unchanging. The stars, when looked upon closely, could be seen in order and in meaning. The observer needed no explanation, for the sky told its own story. The sun burned like a disk of flame, unblinking, eternal. The moon curved with softness, full and round, and then the stars, each named by men, each holding a story. The Pleiades stood as a marker of time and change. The Hyades, close by, curved like a signal of rain. Orion's form was strong, and even if his tale was left untold, his shape was clear, and the meaning behind it waited in the shadows. The bear moved nearby, circling, ever turning, never falling, always watching over the hero in the sky. Leaving the heavens, one could follow the shield's edge downward and walk once more upon the earth. Cities teemed with life, people moved in work and joy. Warriors battled, children danced, fields were sown and harvested. The land was alive. The detail of movement, the flow of limbs and cloth, the bending of trees, the ripple of water, all of it was shaped in metal, as if the fire of the forge had not hardened the bronze, but only captured it in motion. It was not lifeless. It was a world in metal, a breathing thing of hammer and flame. The shield was more than defense. It was history, memory, prophecy, and truth, all bound in a circle. The hands that made it had done so not in haste, but with full knowledge of what it would be. And it became what it was meant to be, something that no mortal hand could copy, something that even gods looked upon with wonder. When the sun bore that shield, he did not carry only armor. He bore a world, and the world knew him. The weight of it did not crush him. It lifted him. It made him more. And as he stepped forward, wearing that shining gift, all who saw him remembered the one who came before, and all waited to see what he would become. And the shield, glowing with stars and sea and fire, did not forget. It remembered, even in silence, the hands that shaped it and the hands that now held it. And so it lived. Things on the earth, namely the cities, are shown here with such care that they seem almost to breathe, frozen yet full of movement. And there are two of them, set apart yet tied together in contrast. One of them draws the eye first, where a festival is taking place and the streets are lit by the soft fire of torches. The flickering light plays against the walls and the air seems to move with music, the high trembling tones of the flute, the sharp string of the lyre, and the deep harmony between them. Dancers move in time to the music, their bodies caught in rhythm, and their feet are light, stepping to the sound that is carved into this still scene as though it truly echoes. The figures are not merely standing, they are in motion, each movement felt in the turn of the shoulder, in the lift of the knee. The light touches their faces, and through the open vestibules of nearby homes, women stand watching, their arms raised in joy or surprise, their mouths open in silent delight. They see the bridal parties, For this is a wedding, the first gathering of families united in joy. The grooms lead the brides from their homes, and every face speaks of emotion carefully carved into the metal, modesty mingling with desire, the two feelings not shown directly but suggested through the pose, the turn of a head, the closeness of two figures. Nothing is shouted, but all is understood, and the craftsman who made this knew how to show without declaring, how to let suggestion carry more weight than words. But beside this place of music and marriage is another space, still within the same city, where a gathering has taken shape that is not of joy, but of judgment. It is a court, and the gathering is solemn. The elders sit in a circle, old and wise, their faces lined with thought, their hands resting on staves. They preside over the session with calm authority, and in the middle of their circle is a symbol of justice. 2 bars of gold lying between the 2 disputants. One of the men accuses the other of murder, while the second defends himself, not by denial of the act, but by claiming he has paid what is owed, that the debt of blood has been satisfied by rightful offering. Around them, supporters gather in 2 groups, each encouraging their own speaker, each convinced of their cause. Hands are raised, mouths open in silent shouts, and yet the heralds hold their staves high, commanding silence, and the crowd quiets. Order is restored, and judgment will be given. The gold in the center waits, gleaming in stillness, perhaps a reward to the one who judges rightly, not to tempt, but to honor truth. This moment shows not war, but not full peace either. It is the space between, where law stands in place of sword, and where a city lives not in battle, but in the struggles of words and choices. And then the second city comes into view, different from the first, for it is a city ready for war. Its walls rise high and firm, and along them stand those who cannot take to the field, old men, women, and children keeping watch, filling the spaces between the towers, their eyes on the horizon, their hands holding whatever weapons they can. These are not warriors, but they will defend what is theirs. But where are the fighters? Look beyond the gate and you will see them. The army marches out, led by those who shine brighter than the rest, for they are shaped in larger form, their bodies covered in gold, and this is how the artist tells you they are not men, but gods. These divine ones move at the front, leading mortals into the field, their presence a sign of fate and power. Behind them come the warriors, fully armed, moving with purpose, refusing the enemy's offer. The proposal had been simple: divide the wealth of the city now, or fight and lose it all. The leaders chose war, and so the army marches out, but not directly into open field. They prepare an ambush, sending men into the thickets by the river. The brush grows thick there, and it is easy to hide, to wait for the enemy to pass, to strike from the shadows. But across the plain, the enemy is wise too, and they have placed scouts, watchful and still, their eyes sharp, their plans unfolding. They begin to understand the trap, and they make ready to turn it. The 2 forces, though one hidden, are locked in a battle not yet begun. The tension runs through the scene like a thread, and every figure on the shield, though made of bronze, feels the weight of what is coming. The shield holds all of this, not just the people, but the moments between action and rest, the feelings that cannot be spoken. The city behind the walls stands firm. The warriors march, the gods watch, the ambush waits, the scouts advance, and all of it, each element, each breath, is caught in this stillness, carved forever into the metal surface, waiting to be understood. Off the booty. Indeed, we see here shepherds herding their flocks to the music of pipes, their bodies relaxed, their motions gentle, unaware of any danger, for their lives have always followed this rhythm of peace. Moving across pastures, guiding sheep and goats, the sounds of soft piping floating through the air, rising above the low bleats and the rustling of the grass beneath hooves. The tune they play is simple, sweet, and clear, the kind of music born of the hills, the kind that speaks not to power or pain, but to stillness and solitude, to the sky above and the land that rolls below. You can almost hear it, can almost feel the breath against the reeds, the gentle pulse of the notes drifting like morning mist. It is a sound of innocence, of lives untouched by war. But this music, though it seems eternal, is playing for the last time. Unaware of the trap that waits in the shadows, these shepherds walk into doom, caught not by nature's change, but by men's plans. The enemy falls upon them, swift and merciless, and in a moment the song ends, the flocks scatter, and the ground turns from calm to chaos. Some of the animals are seized, driven away in a line of white and brown, becoming the spoils of sudden war. The shepherds fall, their lives torn apart before they can even raise a cry. But the ones hidden in the thickets, lying in wait across the riverbank, hear the sounds of violence, shouts, hoofbeats, the startled cries of sheep, and they rise, springing from their ambush. Horses thunder forward, their riders leaning low, weapons drawn, eyes burning with fury. They charge into the fight, crossing the banks that moments before had been still and green. Now the entire area erupts, filled with the clash of men and the flash of bronze. Javelins fly in arcs, sharp points cutting through the air. The river reflects the fury, catching flashes of light and shadow, the sky above suddenly far away. And then come the others, those not of flesh, not of the living world. Among the fighters move strange beings, sliding between the swords and bodies like smoke made of blood and will. One of them, her shape dark and her clothing soaked in red, stalks through the chaos, her hands never still. This is Strife, the one who begins all battle, the spark that leaps from eye to hand, from thought to blow. Close behind her is Tumult, confusion in a body, whose limbs stir the charge, making friend and foe blur in the madness. And above them looms Doom, the darkest of the three, not tied to one man or moment, but to all of it, her fingers reaching toward the dead, the dying, and even those who are yet untouched. She moves without pattern. One man, still whole, she thrusts into the middle of swords, his shield barely raised, his fate sealed by her unseen push. Another lies beneath her dragging hand, already lifeless, pulled through the dust. A third, bloodied and bent, she drives onward again, forcing him to rise, though his wounds beg him to stop. These spirits do not pause, and their faces, if they can be called faces, carry no emotion, only duty. Around them, the men fight on, their expressions locked in fear or rage, their limbs thrown forward in the violence of war, and they seem not figures of art but real warriors in mid-charge, so alive they nearly leap from the metal that binds them. But there is more than battle on this shield. Look again, and you will see a different scene. Land worked not with sword, but with plough. This is fallow ground, rich and wide, being turned by many hands. It is thrice ploughed, a sign of good soil and careful labour, and the lines are neat, deep, clean, moving in long curves across the field. The oxen walk slow and sure, their yokes heavy but steady, and the ploughmen urge them on, turning back again and again to start a new furrow. At the end of each row waits a cup of wine, set there as a gift, a promise, a moment of rest for the man who reaches it. The plough bites into the ground, and though the earth is gold, it seems to darken as the blade passes through, as if the very soil is parting in truth, as if the furrows are real, This is not just the shaping of metal. It is the shaping of effort, of peace, earned by toil. In the next space, the shield opens onto a king's land, and the richness of it is plain. The domain spreads wide, the grain tall and golden, and the harvest is already underway. Workers cut the stalks, their blades swinging in rhythm, and others gather the cut grain, tying it into sheaves and stacking them high. The crop is great, greater than expected, and the joy of the workers is clear in their movements, quick and lively. At the edge of the field stands the king, watching. His eyes shine, and though his body is still, the pride and happiness are carved deep into the lines of his face. He does not speak, but his joy is known. Nearby stands a great oak tree, old and wide, its branches spreading a generous shade. Beneath it, the heralds have prepared a feast, and a fat ox, already chosen and marked, waits for the meal to begin. This is the gift to the workers, a reward for their effort, their strength, their patience. The tree stands as a symbol of rest and reward, and all around it the air is filled with the silent hum of satisfaction. And not far from them, the women move in the background, busy in their way, gathering barley meal, kneading it with strong hands, laughing and calling to one another. Their work is just as vital, for it prepares the food that gives the others strength. They press the dough, shape it, bake it, their arms quick and sure, their faces lit with the same energy that fills the field. The harvest is more than just grain. It is community, and every movement shows this truth. And if there should be a need for fruit, if someone hungers for sweetness beyond the bread, then look again, because just beyond the grain, in another space not far from the oak and the threshing floor, fruit trees rise, heavy with bounty. Their branches bend low with apples, figs, and pears, each one carved with the same care as every other part. Every leaf, every curve, every piece of fruit is a piece of peace. And so the shield shows not only battle, not only the rage of spirits and the rush of death, but also the deep work of life. It shows the silence after war, the music before blood, the joy in harvest, and the meal beneath the tree. And it does so without motion, but not without life. Everything is there, still yet eternal, shaped by hands that knew both grief and glory, both blade and plough, both death and the bread that follows it. Vineyard, golden for the vines and black for the grapes, spreads in perfect order across the surface, its rows drawn with such skill that they seem to grow rather than to be carved. The vines stand tall and heavy with fruit, their branches curving gently, their leaves caught mid-movement as though rustling in a breeze that no one hears but everyone feels. The deep ditch that runs along the edge is not plain, but marked with dark blue inlay, giving the impression of depth so real that one might believe they could fall into it. This clever use of color is not just for beauty, but for meaning. For the darker shade tells the eye what it cannot touch, that the ground dips, that water might pool there, that the roots run deep. Around the vineyard is a boundary, not rough stone or hedge, but a barrier of tin, light and shining, wrapping the vines in a circle of silver protection. Inside the vineyard, posts of silver rise from the ground, each one set beneath the vines, propping up the heavy fruit so it does not fall or bend the plant to breaking. The silver gleams softly under the imagined sun, a reminder of the care given to even the smallest detail. Among the vines, men move through the narrow paths, stepping with ease and purpose, filling baskets with the dark clusters, their arms steady and their rhythm unbroken. They are young, and so are the women beside them, and they move not just with labor but with joy. Their bodies light, their steps time to music. Their movements follow the pattern of a dance, a Bacchic rhythm, full of energy and celebration, as though the harvest were not work at all but ritual, joy made into motion. One among them carries a lyre, and though no sound escapes the surface, one feels the notes in the way the dancers step, the way their limbs rise and fall, as if a melody flows through the bronze itself. He plays softly, and his mouth opens slightly, caught mid-song, singing not loud but with gentle voice, guiding the harvest with music, his notes falling into the rhythm of the workers' steps. A little beyond this scene of grapes and song, there is movement again, but of a different kind. A herd of cattle moves toward the riverbank, their bodies full and solid, each one shaped from gold and tin, their hides shimmering with the light of day. Though made of metal, they seem to breathe, and one almost hears their lowing, deep and patient, filling the quiet between the trees. They press forward slowly, each step measured, each tail flicking as if to chase away unseen flies. Herdsmen follow them, guiding with long staves, their eyes fixed on the path, their legs moving in practiced rhythm. And around them trot dogs, 9 in all, ears perked, legs quick, their noses to the air. These are no decorations. They are hunters, guardians, shaped with alertness in every line. But ahead waits danger. 2 lions leap from the brush, golden bodies arched in motion, fangs bared. They have seized a bull, and he struggles beneath them, his head tossed back, his eyes wide. His body shakes as he bellows, and though no voice escapes the scene, it is felt. The sound of pain and panic caught in the twist of his limbs, the curve of his spine. The lions dig into his flesh, their claws buried, their mouths tearing the entrails already exposed. Blood is not shown, but its presence is everywhere, in the tension of muscle, the bend of horn, the wide eyes of the falling bull. The dogs react, barking wildly, darting in and out, but not daring to strike. Their courage is loud but limited. The herdsmen shout, urge them forward, wave their arms, but still the dogs hesitate, circling, barking, snapping at the air. The lions remain still, fierce and unmoved. The kill theirs. Beyond this, the hills rise again, and on the slopes leap sheep, light and fast, their forms small but clear, each one mid-jump, each one climbing, grazing or running. Pens and folds dot the mountainside, some open, some closed, and huts rest among them, the homes of those who watch the flocks. It is a scene of life, of work and worry, of cycles never ending, shown in balance between predator and prey, effort and reward. And then, in another space, the last scene unfolds, a circle of dancers moving with joy and skill. They hold hands, young men and women, their bodies in motion, their limbs stretched in perfect unity. The circle spins, and as it turns, it does not blur but sharpens, drawing the eye like the wheel of a potter testing his clay, smooth and steady, turning without flaw. The girls wear fine linen, each thread shaped into folds that fall like real cloth, their heads crowned with gold, the bands shaped like leaves or flowers, each one different. The boys wear thin chitons, their fabric drawn with the softest lines, and at their sides hang golden swords, slender and unused, held in silver belts. Their arms are strong, but not raised in battle. Instead, they link in peace, and their feet move as one. The dance turns again, and the image shifts, not because the bronze changes, but because the viewer sees it differently with each glance. It is not stillness, but captured motion, and each figure, though fixed in place, leads into the next. The spinning does not stop. It continues in the mind, a memory shaped in metal, and this dance, like the one Daedalus gave to the daughter of the king, is both art and love, both joy and order. The steps are light, but the meaning is deep. The circle does not break. It carries the eye from one to the other and back again. Every garment, every hand, every step tells a story without words. And so this final scene holds not just bodies, but spirit, not just youth, but eternity. In their movement is all of life, not the harvest or the hunt or the toil, but the celebration that gives all those things meaning. The dance is the end, not because it is the last to be carved, but because it holds everything that came before. In their steps is the rhythm of the plough. In their spin is the cycle of the seasons. In their circle is the shield itself. And so the art ends not in stillness but in motion, not in silence but in song. And in the song, the shield remains whole. Great crowd of men approaches, who show how merry they are. For some who here in the center are turning somersaults and exhibiting sundry kinds of dancing, seem to me evidently to fill the dancers with wonder, their bodies twisting and leaping with such joy that even those who perform the slower steps pause to watch. Their arms flail outward, their legs kick up, and their heads tilt back in laughter that, though silent in the sculpture, can be felt in the way their bodies move. These figures are frozen mid-motion, yet the way they are carved makes them seem to dance forever, spinning and flipping in endless rhythm, drawing the gaze of those around them, capturing the attention of all. The crowd grows tighter, circling them, clapping and moving their feet, caught in the shared delight of this unexpected spectacle. Faces are lifted in amusement, hands are thrown up in approval, and the scene pulses with a feeling of celebration and community. The way each figure reacts to the tumblers in the center reveals how deeply joy connects them, each one responding not just to the movement, but to the spirit of the act itself. The image of the sea on the circle of the rim is not the sea, my boy, but you are to imagine that Okeanos is designed by the artist to represent the boundary of the land depicted upon the shield. This circular stream, running along the very edge of the whole scene, marks the edge of the world, the endless river that encircles everything, dividing what is known from what is beyond. Its waters are shaped not as wild waves, but as gentle curves, flowing in constant motion around the outer band, their surface lined with curls and eddies, the suggestion of movement frozen in gleaming metal. The stream is both an end and a frame, holding within it all the life, joy, war, work, and wonder carved into the great disk. It is not a stormy sea, but a calm one, more symbol than element, made to remind the viewer that everything within it is part of a whole, wrapped together in one vision. The detail of the flow, the smooth arc of each wave, the even spacing of every swirl, shows the care with which the craftsman shaped it. It is both boundary and bridge, marking where the stories begin and end, holding them safe in its round embrace. Enough has been told you of the scenes in relief, but more remains in the tale that follows. The mother of the warrior, knowing her son would face the greatest of foes and the heaviest of fates, went to the master of fire and begged for armor. From the forge of divine hands it came, forged in flame, beaten with skill beyond any mortal smith, shaped for one man alone. The armor gleamed with the brightness of the gods and was brought over the sea by the daughters of the deep, the Nereids rising from the water with it resting upon their shoulders. It was no ordinary armor. It was a gift of sorrow and power, and when the warrior wore it, he became something greater than before. He moved with fury and purpose, and in that shining armor he struck down his enemy, the one whose life had taken so many others, the one who stood before him in the dust of the battlefield. And far from that land, in another tale where war again threatened, the mother of another warrior felt the same fear. Her son, marked for destiny, stood on the edge of battle in a new land, and enemies rose all around him. Cities locked their gates, weapons were sharpened, voices were raised in threat. The goddess saw the danger and felt the old ache in her heart, the same ache she had once felt for another doomed people. Then she turned to her husband, the one who worked in fire, and spoke not with commands but with the soft urgency of love. She reminded him of the past, of when he had answered another mother's tears, when he had forged armor for the one who fell. She did not beg, but her voice carried the weight of everything left unsaid. She had asked nothing when her people's towers fell in flame. She had let fate run its course. But now, with her son standing on foreign soil, she asked. At first he did not answer. His silence was not refusal, but thought. Yet before words could rise, she touched him with arms like soft snow, wrapped herself around him with care and quiet strength. Her touch lit something inside him, a heat not of the forge but of memory and fire older than flame. It moved through his limbs, rising through his body, as sudden as lightning slicing a dark sky. The spark awakened in him, not just desire but devotion, not just the echo of love, but the will to act. Her beauty, still as powerful as the day he first shaped it into form, held him once again. And in the warmth of her closeness, he answered, not with speech, but with the movement of hands, with the ringing of hammers, with the glow of embers. She needed no more persuasion. The fire had been lit. He would make again what only he could make, and he would shape it not for glory, not for pride, but because she had asked, because once, long ago, he had done the same for another. Because even a God who works with fire can be moved by tears, and even an immortal hand can be guided by love. Of your trust in me, my goddess, if you had brought me your troubles that other time, then too I could rightfully have armed the Trojans. For neither the Father Almighty nor fate's decrees forbade that Troy should stand or Priam survive another 10 years. And now, if your purpose is to make all ready for warfare, any effort that's mine to give in the exercise of my craft, whatever can be done with iron and molten alloys, all work of furnace and bellows. Nay, plead no more. Why need you cast doubt upon your influence over me? These words, firm but full of warmth, marked the turning point, where love and purpose joined in the heart of the one who worked with fire and metal. Thus speaking, he gave his wife the love he was aching to give her. And then, with her in his arms, he surrendered to sleep, deep and peaceful, his breath slowing, the night holding them in silence. But sleep did not last long, for as soon as he had woken, rested and needing no more dreams, in the small hours when night was waning and the first light began to stir in the distance, the Fire Lord rose from his downy bed, shaking off the softness of rest and turning again toward work. He did not delay, for the task weighed in his thoughts and filled his hands with urgency. From the heavens he descended, making his way toward the place where heat and noise were constant, the sacred island known for its fire and its rumbling earth. Between the Sicilian coast and Aeolian Lipare, there lies an island, its cliffs rising steep and jagged, from whose cracks smoke rises endlessly, dark and curling. Beneath those rocks, deep within, are vaults hidden from the eyes of men, a cavern shaped by flame and force where the Cyclops worked. It was a volcanic forge roaring with power, echoing with the sound of hammers striking anvils and the rush of flame through narrow vents. The cavern pulsed with life, a place not of silence but of movement and fire. This was Volcanus' place, the center of his craft, and the island bore his name, Vulcania. Here the fire god came and found the Cyclops hard at work in the heart of the forge, where metal glowed red and tools rang loud. Brontes and Steropes, Pericmon, stripped to the waist, were already in motion. Their bodies glistened with sweat, their muscles tightened with effort, and in front of them was a half-finished thunderbolt. They shaped it with focus and fury, a weapon like those the Father of the Sky hurls from the clouds to strike the earth. This one was not yet done, but its pieces were in place. It had 3 fins of spinning sleet, 3 of pounding storm, 3 of russet fire, and 3 of sharp wind. The sound that would roar through the heavens, the light that would blind the sky, the heat that would burn even thought. They added all these to the core, building a weapon of fear and punishment. Elsewhere in the cavern, work continued. A chariot was being shaped for the god of war, wheels spinning as they were fitted, the body strong and swift, meant to carry a god into battle where nations trembled. On another side, some workers focused on the Aegis, the shield of the war goddess, which she wore in her fury, a golden surface that looked like the skin of a serpent. It shimmered with scales and serpents twisted along its edge, writhing as if alive, their eyes frozen in warning. At the center of it was the Gorgon, her head severed, but her face still terrible, her eyes rolling even in death, the snarl on her lips caught forever in metal. And then came the voice of the god, loud and direct. Put all that work aside, pack in the jobs you're engaged on, you Cyclops of Mount Etna, and turn your attention to this, the making of arms for a hot-blooded hero. Now there is need for your strength, your speediest work, and your master craftsmanship. Get bustling on it at once. That was all he said, and it was enough. Without question or pause, they dropped what they were doing, set aside thunderbolts and shields, chariots and blades, and turned to the task their master now set before them. They moved quickly, sharing the labor with perfect rhythm, each taking up the part that suited him best. Flames rose higher, bellows roared, and the work began. Rivers of molten bronze and gold flowed down the channels carved into the stone floor, and deadly steel glowed white in the furnace, its surface rippling with heat. They poured the metal with care and precision, each motion practiced, their hands steady even as sparks flew in showers around them. First, they shaped a shield, huge, round and strong. It was a shield not only for defense, but for legend, a shield meant to carry more than strength. It would be the guard against all weapons the Latins might bring, a wall of metal that could stand alone. 7 layers they welded together, each one strong, and bound each to the next with care. The heat rose, the light filled the chamber, and the roar of the forge became the breath of creation. Each hammer strike echoed like thunder, each spin of the wheel added shape to what would become armor fit for a son of fate. This was no ordinary task. This was the shaping of a destiny, and the fire blazed brighter. Some pump away at the bellows, drawing in air and expelling it. Some dip the hissing metal in troughs. The cavern groans under the stress of anvils. They raise their arms with the powerful alternate rhythm of cranks. They keep the iron ore turning in the close grip of their tongs. The flames roar louder as the bellows swell and collapse, sucking in air and pushing out great gusts of heat that turn the stone walls red. Sparks jump with every hammer strike, flaring up and vanishing in a blink. The metal hisses as it meets water, steam bursting out in clouds that hang in the thick air. The clanging of tools echoes from wall to wall, from roof to floor, a rhythm of effort and focus. Each movement is practiced, every gesture part of a well-learned dance passed down by fire and time. They twist the molten bronze into shapes with their tools, layering, folding, hammering, and turning with skill that made even the gods marvel. The anvils beneath their blows are blackened and scarred, ancient things that have borne countless dreams in the heat of creation. The tongs grip hot ore like claws, never letting go as it shifts and reshapes under force and fire. Sweat runs down arms and backs, dripping onto the glowing ground, but none stop or slow, each one caught in the sacred duty of building what the gods have commanded. The island itself seems to pulse with their work, each blow of hammer and wheel feeding the fire's breath. While on Aeolian shores the Lord of Lemnos was hurrying forward his work, Evander was roused from his humble dwelling, awakened by a world that trembled with signs. The air, calm just a moment ago, began to change. The sky, clear and open, started to stir with unseen power. Venus sent them a sign out of the clear sky. Without warning, lightning split the heavens, bright and sharp. The sky cracked open with a thunderous cry that rolled across the hills like a storm breaking free from silence. The light blazed down from above, and the earth beneath seemed to flinch as if the very bones of the land had shivered. It was not a storm born of weather, but of purpose. The heavens shook with a flash of lightning and thunder pealed. It seemed as if the whole universe suddenly tottered and Etruscan trumpets were bawling above them, calling out like voices from another realm. Again and again, the blast of celestial noise echoed across the land, as if the sky itself had become a battlefield and the clouds were filled with the sounds of war. The people looked up, their eyes wide, their breaths caught in their chests. They could not speak, could not move, stunned by the overwhelming signs from above. Up there among the fleecy clouds in the fair weather sky were arms, red glinting and thunderously clashing through the clear air. Blades shimmered in the sun, polished surfaces reflecting the day like mirrors set afire. Shields spun through the sky, their edges glowing with gold, their centers dark as night. Spears rose and fell, flashing like comets before vanishing into the clouds. The air rang with metal striking metal, a song of battle before a war. The sky was no longer a silent roof, but a place alive with fire and motion. The rest were stunned with amazement, unsure if they were dreaming or if the gods had truly opened the heavens to reveal their secrets. But the Trojan hero did not hesitate, for in the voice of thunder and in the clash of arms he heard something more. The sound rang with meaning deep and powerful. In that sound, he heard not chaos but promise. He knew that this was no accident, no cruel trick of nature. He remembered the words she had spoken long ago, when the world was quieter. She had told him what would come. She had made a vow that when the time was right, when war was at their door, she would give him a sign, and she would come to him with the help he would need. And now, here in the open air, with all eyes turned to the sky, that promise lived. For what they saw above them was not only the work of hands and fire, but of love and purpose. This was the fulfillment of her word, the proof that she had not forgotten. And so, in the face of amazement, in the heart of awe, he lifted his voice and cried out, not in fear, not in confusion, but in understanding. This is the sign, he thought, the one my goddess mother foretold. This is what she promised she would send if war was looming close. And now it is here. The battle draws near, and she is with me. Through the air, with the arms of the god of fire, she comes to help. She keeps her word, and now I must keep mine. The sky still rang with noise, but to him it was not frightening. It was the sound of fate arriving, and the fire above mirrored the fire in his heart, set alight by the memory of her vow and the weight of what must come next.